He is a sorcerer? Someone asked. Yeah, that was clearly chains made from a spell, that was not a skill. What is his attribute? Black lightning. Gaze after gaze strangely stared at the prince. Although the latter had just ascended to the 6th level, the power he possessed was clearly extremely astonishing. Under numerous shocked gazes, the prince curved his lips. This spell works much better than I thought. Boy, that attack would have killed you if landed, Fenrir spoke. I know, but only if that had landed. I believed in my intuition. Fenrir sighed. My misfortune, I am stuck with a reckless boffin. Ezra laughed. He looked towards the crowd that had been awed by his punch and said, Is there anyone else who wants the bounty? If so, please hurry up. Everyone looked at each other, bitterly shaking their heads in the end as they began to withdraw. Ezra's earlier punch had already made clear his strength. It was not known whether the third circled bald sorcerer was dead or alive after receiving a single punch, and most of them were at best only equal in strength to the latter. If they stubbornly chose not to back off, they would likely end up with the same fate as the bald man. Another thing was the guarding martial masters of Bloodfang. They didn't make a move when bald sorcerer was attacking, even after witnessing his power. Therefore, although spiritual crystals were valuable, they were not worth one's own life. Given the current situation, people like them could no longer interfere. The Prince of Bloodfang clapped his head when he saw them withdraw. He coldly spoke. Did I allow you to leave? His voice resounded, halting the masses. What? You want to fight all of us? Someone asked. All of you will die here together with this stupid musclehead, uttered Ezra as he looked at Ixtal Malark. The latter's expression was currently extremely ugly, clearly surprised that the bald sorcerer did not cause even a single injury to Ezra. Instead, the bald man had even become an example for others, making them too intimidated to interfere any longer. The bearman took in a deep breath, his grim expression gradually returning to an expressionless one. He stared at Ezra Zephyr, killing intent flooding out in his eyes as his hand slowly closed around the fiery long dim red axe that appeared within it. Powerful chi erupted from his body like a storm, shaking the surrounding space. An overwhelming pressure enveloped the area. The numerous gazes in the vicinity looked towards him in respect. Ixtal's strength was clearly at a different level than ordinary core formation experts. The axe in his hand was slowly raised, pointing towards Ezra Zephyr as an icy voice sounded across the mountain. I originally wanted to save myself the trouble, but it seems that I have to do this personally. Well, guess I'll save myself 3 million spiritual crystals. The numerous figures on the mountain began to back away, their gazes filled with searing anticipation as they looked towards the bulky bearman. Will the next chieftain of the Bearman tribe will fight him personally? They asked as their eyes even forgot how to blink. On the mountain range, rocks rotated along the big bulky axe in Ixtal's hand as he pointed it at Ezra Zephyr while his smoky black chi churned in the sky above, forming a giant black cloud. Thick and searing waves spread from within it. Ixtal had yet to attack, but the pressure from him had already exceeded the bald man from earlier. As expected from the Bearman tribe of Stripe Beast Empire. Numerous figures whispered inside the mountain range. There was no need to question Ixtal Malark's strength. He was an elite even amongst the many prided geniuses. The current him had already reached the peak first level of the core formation stage and was much stronger than ordinary core formation experts. I'm afraid that Bloodfang's prince will not be able to flaunt his power like before. It was true. When you compared the two, Ixtal was clearly superior. He wielded a special tier earth-shattering axe, and had numerous tricks up his sleeves. No matter how one looked at it, Ixtal's chances at victory were higher. Humph, let's see who will save you this time. Iciness flowed in Sky Lisa's eyes. She had originally believed that it would be easy to deal with Ezra, but the latter just seemed to become more and more of a problem. In the end, even Ixtal Malark had been forced to personally take action. However, it was over now. She looked towards the remaining few Spirity Beast squad members and coldly said, block off all of his escape paths and stop his countrymen from helping him, he will not be allowed to flee this time. The remaining few members had already completely cast their lot in with Ixtal Malark. Hence, all of them nodded after hearing Sky Lisa's words before dispersing in all directions, sealing every path of escape available to Ezra and surrounding the 56 martial masters of Bloodfang Kingdom. "Shifa, we must help His Majesty," a member of Bloodfang said. "No, His Majesty hasn't given any orders, we must wait for orders," replied the calm and composed Shifa. "But believe in His Majesty," there added. On the mountain top, Ezra calmly watched them do so, not seeming to care at all, but a sinister smile formed on his face as if he had planned something for everyone. His gaze soon changed and locked onto Ixtal. The strength displayed by the latter was indeed far beyond regular experts. The fire of battle intent slowly rose in Ezra's eyes. Before his martial breakthrough, his chances of victory against an opponent at Ixtal's level were naturally slim, but now, it was going to be very different. Efsa, Dripa. The dual weapons appeared in Ezra's hands, a short sword's sharp tip that flickered with a chilling bluish light and tormenting poisonous hook, itching to dig holes. Black chaotic lightning also began to swirl around Ezra Zephyr like a thunderstorm, turning all the rocks in the vicinity to dust. Ixtal tightly gripped his axe as he coldly said, "I will let you know that your qualifications are not enough to permit such arrogance before me." The instant he finished speaking, Ixtal's figure abruptly shot forward, his figure blinking from place to place like a ball of cloud before arriving in front of Ezra Zephyr. The former's axe shook, transforming into countless flashes of smoky chi with a dim red sparkle that seemed to cover the sky as they engulfed Ezra Zephyr, targeting his limbs. However, Ezra merely let out a prolonged laugh in response, no fear whatsoever as the hook thrust forward to meet the attack head-on. A dark purple radiance curled around the poisonous hook Dripa's tip, the small blades on it shone like 1,000 stars. Clang, clang. Axe and howl clashed, sparks flying with loud clangs. Spiritual energy rippled violently every time they met, shaking the surrounding air. In a short span of a dozen breaths, the two had already exchanged dozens of blows. Every strike was ruthless without the slightest shred of mercy. Clunk. This time, the spear and short sword collided, only to be pushed back once again. Prince Ezra's arm suddenly jerked as the invisible chain Gleipnit came into play and Efsa was shot forward, stabbing towards Ixtal Malark's throat at a tricky angle. However, just as the attack was about to land, an axe was swung towards it, slightly changing the trajectory of the bluish sword as it missed its target. Ezra's expression was icy, with a thought, his body moved on its own, the hook and sword were extended, and the dual weapons were moving in the air as if they were two whips that seemed to reach the sky as they descended, aimed at every inch of Ixtal's body. What a bizarre set of spiritual weapons. Ixtal's pupils tightened slightly. Ezra's dual weapons were on a continuous rampage. Its bizarre movement and powers were mysterious. Gleipnit was a chain that couldn't be seen with the naked eye, making the dual weapons very challenging to counter. However, Ixtal Malark was no weakling. With a slight swing of the earth-shattering axe in his hand, pebbles engulfed in smoky chi began to rise from it, forming a shield of black rocks in front of him. Dong dong. Countless whip-like attacks struck at the black rock, but all were repelled in the end. Ezra Zephyr's and Ixtal Malark's figures were simultaneously blown backwards. Ixtal's expression was grave, the earth-shattering axe drawing a long scar on the ground. Opposite him, Ezra drifted backwards, while the duo's purple and blue weapons rapidly gathered back in his grip. The attacks of both parties had been vicious in their previous clash. However, every attack had ultimately been blocked. The pupils of everyone watching the fight shrank slightly at this moment, evidently surprised that Ezra Zephyr did not seem to be at a disadvantage even against a core formation stage expert like Ixtal Malark. "I've truly underestimated you. To be capable of so much at the 6th level of the Chi brightening stage is remarkable." Ixtal's eyes lowered slightly, his tone indifferent as he continued, "If given some time, I'm afraid that no one will hold much superiority against you. Your talent is truly terrifying. In fact, I've begun to believe it now." Ezra's eyebrows raised slightly. "Believe what?" Ixtal calmly answered, Believe that you really are the so-called heir of the werewolf's ancestral martial spirit and that Benedict Brownmane had merely stolen your martial spirit, allowing him to reach where he is today. Ezra smiled but did not comment. However, Ixtal paused, an extremely dangerous look emerging in his eyes as he stared at the Prince of Bloodfang. That is also why I've decided that it will be best to kill you here. Ezra chuckled. I'm afraid that you're not that capable. Ixtal flatly responded, I know that you obtained that gamma layer skill, but I also know that you have not learned it. Ezra's eyes narrowed slightly. The requirements to learn a gamma layer skill are exceedingly stringent, plus your focus has been on breaking through into the 6th level while hiding here, and you naturally did not have the time nor conditions. Therefore, you cannot possibly have learned it. And even if you get the chance, time and everything, you still won't be able to learn it because you are not a cultivator, you are a sorcerer. Ixtal's calm explanation was filled with certainty. Ezra Zephyr slowly replied, you are pretty smart. It was indeed as Ixtal had guessed. Although Ezra knew how to practice the gamma layer skill, glittering wind and light, he had yet to learn it. Ixtal laughed, his hand slowly tightening around the strong earth-shattering axe as a toying look surfaced in his eyes. It's just such a pity, you don't have a gamma layer skill, but... The chi around him began to churn violently at this moment, akin to a black storm of thick smoke as it swept outwards, while astonishing ripples pulsed from his body. The ground below his feet began to tremble. I have one. Shocked gaze after gaze watched as smoky black chi shot out from the top of Ixtal's head, culminating into a giant ring. An almighty and frightening pressure pulsed. As the prince gazed at the blackish ring, his eyes narrowed. A titanic black ring floated above Ixtal Malark, emitting oppressing and berserk waves that dried up and cracked the ground below. Every gaze in the mountain range was tinged with fear and astonishment as they watched this scene. That's a gamma layer skill. Ixtal is the firstborn of Bearman's chieftain, it is not strange for him to have mastered one. That beastman has so many trump cards. It's going to become dangerous for Ezra Zephyr. Given Ixtal's strength, even those super elite geniuses will have to face such power with seriousness. It's a gamma layer skill, after all, its power is enough to be a game changer. Numerous whispers rang out. There was now a trace of pity in the gazes that looked towards Ezra. The latter had displayed his extremely solid foundations when he fought with Ixtal, but it was ultimately still only the chi brightening stage. Someone sighed, Bloodfang's prince is still young and has yet to realize his full potential. If he had patiently bided his time instead and mastered a 5th or 6th circle spell, Ixtal will not be able to do anything against him. Skylisa's pretty face radiated with happiness when she was this. Her gaze turned towards Ezra, a mocking look emerging as she said, the consequences of angering the Bearman King is not something the likes of you can withstand. Under those numerous pitying gazes, Ezra's expression turned rather grave as he stared at the giant smoky black ring above Ixtal. The undulations that pulsed from it were extremely destructive. Such power had indeed far surpassed the level of other geniuses present. The power and pressure of his gamma layer skill are not inferior to that of Razor Pearl Eagle, muttered Ezra under his breath. Ixtal was indeed a formidable foe. If it was before his breakthrough, he would likely have no choice but to avoid it. Unfortunately for Ixtal, black terrifying lightning began to surge out of the prince's body, thundering and expanding around him like a howling dark black hurricane. Astonishing fluctuations pulsed outwards, shaking the mountain below his feet. Gasp after gasp rang out when the onlookers saw this scene. Ezra is really remarkable. He's only at the 6th level of the chi brightening stage, but his chi levels do not lose to a core formation stage practitioner. Wait, he is a sorcerer, right? Then why he has a cultivator's foundation and not sorcerer's circles? Look at his spiritual energy, it's different than mana and chi, it's more like a martial animal's force. Now that you mention that, what is he actually? Moreover, from how concentrated his spiritual energy looks, it's definitely not low-grade martial spirit. No wonder he dares to put himself against Ixtal Malark. But even so, I'm afraid that he is still not his match. The black ring above Ixtal faintly trembled, a sign that its power was about to approach its peak. His cold eyes gazed at Ezra Zephyr as he said, "Why do you still try such meaningless actions? Wouldn't it be better to obediently wait for death?" His finger slowly extended, pointing towards the prince as an emotionless voice echoed from his mouth. Gamma layer skill, Dark Wheel of Death. BBZZZZZ. The giant blackish ring shook violently for a moment, before suddenly disappearing from sight a split second later. It was too fast to be seen by the naked eye. The only things everyone was able to observe were space distortion and a flash of blackness. As smoke swept past, the ground below dried up and crumbled. In the face of such a devastating attack, even those with the strength of the core formation stage would feel their scalps turn numb. Was this the power of a gamma layer skill? If they were the ones in Ezra's place, they would not even have any chance of dodging and being killed in an instant. At that point, even Bloodfang martial masters became worried as they exchanged gazes. But, they have been strictly ordered to not interrupt, and not only that, they were surrounded by the other martial masters. Dark smoke covered the horizon, rapidly enlarging in Ezra's eyes. Even the surrounding air seemed to burn, producing a burnt smell. A breath was slowly dispelled from the prince's mouth. His hands came together as he hit the ground below with full power. Boom. Dust rose, and amidst the dust and smoke, a low voice seemed to quietly escape his lips. "Fenrir, come out." The instant Ezra's voice was heard, the black bolts thundered around him and suddenly expanded once again. The gigantic wolf of Norse appeared. Prior to this attack, Ezra learned that Fenrir can swallow the chi and mana to a certain limit. The giant wolf growled, opening its enormous mouth to swallow the incoming dark wheel of death. Boom. The sounds of explosions rang out from the monstrous wolf's body but did not continue for long. Meanwhile, the wolf's titanic body shrank with each explosion. The gamma layer skill that Ixtal had put all his power into had been neutralized in this manner. How is this possible? Countless cries of surprise rang out at practically the same time, after nearly popping from their sockets. How could they have imagined such an outcome? To think that Ixtal's terrifyingly powerful gamma layer skill had disappeared like this, without causing even a tiny ripple. How had Ezra done it? The expression on Ixtal's face turned rigid little by little. Some distance behind him, Skylise looked as if she had just seen a ghost, her mouth so wide an egg could be easily popped in. "It seems that your little gamma layer skill has yet to be properly mastered. Its power seems to be a little weak." Ezra chuckled when he saw Ixtal's stiff expression. "Boy, that was reckless," said Fenrir. Although the monstrous wolf of Norse devoured the skill, its power was beyond the level of Ezra, and he received some damage as well. "What kind of spell is this?" Ixtal's complexion was ashen. Ezra ignored the question. With a flick, the short sword Efsa abruptly darted forward, heading straight for Ixtal. The sword was extremely quick, appearing in front of Ixtal in a flash. Fear finally flitted across Behrman's eyes. He gritted his teeth as rapidly retreated, while another marble armament appeared in his hand and was quickly snapped. BBZZ. A circular shield of light appeared in front of him. It was obviously another defensive spiritual imprint treasure. CLLIANNK. The bluish sharp sword stabbed into the shield, causing it to ripple violently. Ixtal continued to hurriedly flee backwards as cracks began to appear on the shield. His gaze flickered in calculation. In the end, a grudging look flitted across his eyes as his figure retreated back to Skylise's side, grabbing her wrist as he shouted, "Go." A scroll appeared in his hand and was quickly torn. Rays of light instantly exploded from it, swallowing the both of them. CRRACKK. However, the shield also broke at this moment. There was no time for Efsa to stab them, but at the same time the sword glowed, some words were heard by Ezra in his mind. He jerked Gleipnit and Efsa made a swing. Ezra uttered 2 words. Portal cutter. The light below Ixtal and Sky's feet grew brighter and brighter, evidently some kind of spiritual imprint used for escaping. A strange voice came into Ezra's head and he muttered, "Portal cutter." With a slight jerk, Efsa sent a slash, lightning fast at the duo. Both saw the strange incoming attack. The smarter one understood that it is something dangerous, and she pushed Ixtal into the portal. The slash arrived and struck her, but not a single drop of blood was revealed on her body as the slash crossed her body and hit the newly formed escaping portal. The moment portal cutter hit the portal, it instantly distorted and closed. Wait! Sky! Ixtal yelled as the portal was forcefully closed by Ezra. The bearman left the love of his life inside the jaws of death. No, 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 this can't happen, no. He yelled like a madman. Ezra looked at his sword in surprise. What was this? That was one of the skills of your weapons. You underestimate the might of your weapons. These will be considered best even in the upper realm, replied Fenrir. Ezra smiled and tightened his grip on his weapons with satisfaction. As he looked forward, his sight landed on Sky Lee's. His evil crimson eyes glowed. Oh, you stupid musclehead, you have left something very precious behind. He grinned and raised his one eyebrow as he asked Sky Lee's. Am I right? Sky Lee's was afraid Ixtal Malark really had plenty of life-preserving methods. However, did she think that Ezra Zephyr would so easily cancel the portal of escape as he pleased? With a cold chuckle, Ezra Zephyr sent out an order. Martial Masters of Bloodfang Kingdom, kill everyone. Sky Lee's could only watch in surprise as the 56 martial masters jumped out towards the gigantic crowd of around 3,000 martial masters without an ounce of hesitation. However, their armaments changed. They all revealed their special grade weapons as they marched. What bullshit is this? They are fighting against us all? How stupid of them, and here I was about to respect that prince. RAAWWWWRRRR. On the other side, a gigantic growl was heard, stunning every one of them. When they turned their gaze, a dark bluish bear, with ferocity, crawling on his veins. A martial animal? It seems to be of second tier as well. Is that a Mad Titan bear? No way, since when Mad Titan bear looked like that. Just when their surprise was unleashed, another terrifying cry was heard. Kairirka. The familiar cry sent chills through their bones. From the side of a mountain, the assumed dead razor pearl eagle emerged. Unscratched and uninjured. Run! Run! You fools! The battle between Ezra and Ixtal ended unexpectedly quickly. Before any of the onlookers could react, Ixtal Malark disappeared and Sky Lee's was left behind. A new crowd gradually gathered. They involuntarily swallowed their saliva when they gazed upon the mess of a battlefield once again. No one had expected that the Ixtal Malark of Stripe Beast Empire would actually flee. He had the strength of the core formation stage, and only a handful of people amongst the Naren continent's younger generation surpassed him. Yet, he had been beaten by Ezra Zephyr, a recently ascended 6th level chi brightening stage. Moreover, Ixtal had lost even after bringing out his Gamma Layer skill. Gaze after gaze seemed to gradually change when they looked towards Ezra again. There was now a little less scrutiny and a little more respect. Silence blanketed the mountains. Everyone knew that Ezra Zephyr's name would resound in the spirity bailiwick after today's battle. Ezra paid no attention to their gazes. He merely made a beckoning motion with his hand and the bluish short sword Efsa returned. He gazed at his hook and sword with love. Ezra gently swung it from side to side as he came closer to Sky Lee's. He's really good at running. The prince shook his head. He had still underestimated the tricks Ixtal Malark had up his sleeve. The latter was practically overflowing with treasures to preserve one's life and escape. Well, you won't be feeling too good either even if you escaped. The prince softly chuckled. At the final moment, he had caught the mastermind of the Spirity Beast squad and all the other martial masters who went after the bounty. The prince looked at Sky Lee's. Time to see what this young lady has to offer for her life, uttered the prince. She quickly threw a pouch to him. It was a spatial pouch. Black lightning surged towards the universe pouch in Ezra's hand. A faint spiritual imprint appeared at the mouth of the pouch, blocking the foreign power. However, the resistance was not much of an obstruction to Ezra Zephyr. After sending out a dozen waves of black bolts, the spiritual imprint gradually dimmed, eventually shattering. With a thought, Ezra Zephyr's senses swept into the bag and took a good look at its contents. The first items to appear were 8 gold spiritual crystal cards. These were spiritual crystal cards of the Crystal Pavilion, and each gold one could be exchanged for 1,000,000 spiritual crystals. 8 gold spiritual crystal cards represented 8,000,000 spiritual crystals. What a wealthy little lady. The sight of these 8 gold crystal cards made the corners of Sky Lisa's mouth twitch a little. But she couldn't do anything, her safety was her priority. The prince continued to inspect the contents of the universe pouch. There were many useful and valuable things inside, including several rare spiritual resources. This spoke volumes about Bearman Ixtal Malarka's wealth, because he was the one who gave her that pouch. Oh ho, a lightning rod stone? A deep black stone suddenly appeared in Ezra's hand. The mottled stone was full of holes and seemed to faintly give off a gleam akin to lightning. A pleasant surprise flashed in his eyes when he saw it. The lightning rod stone could help Ezra smoothen the process of drawing lightning into his body, increasing the speed and power of Black Bolt's chaos force. What a pleasant surprise. After going through the entire bag, the prince felt rather regretful that there was no Dark Wheel of Death Gamma Layer skill inside. But it made sense, a Gamma Layer skill was a valuable treasure even to a powerful faction like Bearman of Stripe Beast Empire. Ixtal could not possibly be allowed to easily take it with him after the fact that he had a special grade, Earth-Shattering Axe. Even so, the haul this time was pretty good. Now that Ezra was done with the pouch, his gaze turned towards the figures that were still in the vicinity. Caver and Razor Pearl Eagle wreaked havoc together with 56 martial masters of Bloodfang Kingdom. What are all of you doing? You will make the whole continent your enemy? Bloodfang martial masters were naturally not going to be nice to those who had come for his bounty. Upon hearing the words of Ezra, the figures on the mountain launched the attack. If it was before, the surrounding martial masters would have likely cursed and scolded. However, the current Ezra Zephyr had beaten off even someone like Ixtal Malark. Such frightening battle power was something they naturally did not dare to offend. As well as the powerful martial masters of Bloodfang were on a killing spree together with 2 martial animals who were not touching any of Bloodfang's martial masters. Hence, the figures of the mountain retreated in a dejected manner to avoid death. Ezra paid them no attention. He also prepared to leave the area and find an appropriate place to learn the Gamma Layer skill. At this moment, however, he suddenly sensed something and lifted his head, gazing towards the untouchable spirity tablet high up in the sky. The table was currently shaking. Practically every prided genius in the entire spirity bailiwick felt this disturbance. Heads were immediately raised, looks of astonishment soon arising on their faces. Light began to converge in the tablet, and for the first time ancient words slowly appeared. It was a name. The first name that had appeared on the spirity tablet. The name was Ezra Zephyr. 6th level Chi Brightening Stage, Ezra Zephyr, battled 1st level Core Formation Stage, Ixtal Malark retreated. They were just 18 simple words, but they caused tremendous waves in the spirity bailiwick. Countless geniuses were flabbergasted as they stared at the tablet, completely shocked by the information that had appeared on it. They naturally knew who Ixtal Malark was. He was one of those that stood at one of the apex positions of Naren Continent's younger generation, and one of the greatest contenders for the greatest gift of the spirity bailiwick. And yet, the tablet had declared that Ixtal Malark had been beaten into retreat? Who was Ezra Zephyr? How can he possess such terrifying strength? Moreover, there were countless intense battles that had already occurred in the spirity bailiwick. While only this particular battle had been acknowledged by the tablet, what did this say? This meant that the battle had already reached the level where it could be acknowledged by the spirity tablet. One could imagine how impossible it was for a 6th level Chi Brightening expert to defeat 1st level Core Formation expert. In the mountain forest, Zulfi's eyes were wide open, mouth agape, as he stared at the spirity tablet. A long while later, he violently sucked in a breath of cool air. Others may not know who Ezra Zephyr was, but how could he not? His Majesty had actually encountered Ixtal Malark? And even exchanged blows with him? From the looks of it, His Majesty seemed to have forced Ixtal Malark into withdrawing. He had taken the advantage in their fight. A warm feeling flowed in Zulfi Dimitri's heart. Ezra Zephyr had such a nonchalant and dominant character. The reason he purposely went against Ixtal Malark was very likely to show the whole continent the power of the current Bloodfang kingdom. His Majesty has left his name on the tablet, looks like I'll have to work harder. From the looks of it, one will have to achieve a battle accomplishment on the level of the core formation stage in order to leave one's name on the tablet. Numerous ideas swirled in Zulfi Dimitri's head. In the end, he ceased hesitation, his toes pushing off the ground as greenish sword chi surged out from beneath his feet, forming a dark green cloud that brought him into the sky. I should also break through before meeting up with His Majesty and the rest. As he jumped and was still in midair, he saw the tablet shining again. Zulfi looked up. First level core formation stage, Shifa Pista, killed 13 core formation stage experts against the odds. First level core formation stage, their Gale Arms, killed 8 core formation stage experts against the odds. Swish swish swish. One after another, the tablet shone and around 11 names appeared on the tablet after their Gale Arms. Zulfi's eyes widened, and he remembered those names. Every one of them was the martial master of Bloodfang Kingdom. Oh my goodness! Murmured Zulfi. A certain individual gazed at the tablet, his eyes filled with ferocity. Disgraceful bearmen, always ahead in ruining my empire's name. He said as he clenched his fist. Crack. Blood oozed from within his hands. The fierce youth was holding a sliced head in his hand that just busted. A white-dressed man with a long white sword on back smiled at the tablet. The Prince of Bloodfang Kingdom lived up to his words. He said and moved. Like that, every genius looked at the tablet in astonishment. Salom Ixtal was seated on a mountain peak, his head raised to view the spirity tablet in the sky. The expression on his face fluctuated as he stared at the words on the tablet. Moments later, he mumbled to himself, Ezra Zephyr. Why have I not heard of this person's power, and what made a such devastated kingdom and crippled prince so powerful in a short time? Salom frowned slightly. He had a verbal quarrel and the outcome was him being in a disadvantageous position, leaving him no option but to withdraw as well. His martial spirit must be extremely powerful and he is likely hiding something. Salom slowly muttered, his expression turning much graver for the first time. He had a feeling that Ezra Zephyr would likely be his biggest obstacle this time. It will be a huge problem if I don't find a way to eliminate him. Mumbled Salom Ixtal to himself. His eyes suddenly narrowed slightly as he icily said, since you're already here, show yourself. Sneaking around and hiding, what difference is there between you and a rat? The surroundings remained silent. A cold light flashed in Salom's eyes. His 5 fingers suddenly clenched into a fist as he fiercely punched in a certain direction. Boom! His chi whizzed forth, damaging even the ground below his feet. The chi shot towards a certain spot. However, just as it was about to hit, the space there suddenly rippled as a pale hand slowly reached out. The hand gently twirled, stopping the domineering chi when it was right in front of the palm. Strange grey chi gushed out from the pale hand, clashing against the chi of Salom. In the end, the latter was completely corroded away with a final fizzle. Why the need to be so hostile against a guest from far away? A raspy voice suddenly rang out. Space rippled again as a figure in loincloth slowly appeared. The young man in black had a set of lifeless grey pupils that looked akin to vortexes, a sight that made one shiver. Who are you? I don't recall someone like you amongst those from the Naren continent. Salom frowned as he stared at the grey pupil youth. The aura from the latter's body made him feel the need to be wary. This youth was clearly no ordinary individual. The youth in loincloth seemed to grin. Upper Realm, Los Filipinos, Rolo or. Salom's pupil shrank slightly as he said in a cold voice, someone from the Upper Realm? This spirity bailiwick belongs to our lower realm's Naren continent. You people from the Upper Realm dare to sneak in? Looks like you are up to nothing good, and probably intend to snatch away the greatest blessing. The youth in loincloth shook his head. Blessings are granted by the will of the destiny and are not exclusive in nature. Only the strong are worthy of it. If I manage to take it, it would only mean that I am more qualified than the prided geniuses of the Naren continent or lower realm in the whole. Salom faintly said, then let me test if you do have the qualifications. The chi began to rise from his body, forming a great rod behind him as the rock below him began to shake. The chi cultivated was a little similar to Ixtal Malarka's, only more domineering. The youth in loincloth. I am not here to fight you, but propose a certain cooperation. Cooperation? Salom's eyes narrowed. The youth called Rolo or answered in a raspy voice, I saw the battle between Ezra Zephyr and Ixtal Malark. Salom's heart shivered a little. He had not realized there was someone who could come here after witnessing that fight, the distance was too long. It seems that Rolo or had some very strange abilities. You don't believe I was there, right? Hee, but Ezra Zephyr knew I was there. The reason why he did not use his full power was because he was guarding against me. The vortexes in Rolo's gray pupils rotated. It is true that I never expected someone like that to appear in your Naren continent. He showed a thin smile. Salom was expressionless. I heard that Ezra Zephyr has a pretty bad relationship with your true love Emily Jomez. That's why you will ultimately pit yourself against him. Rolo slowly continued, he's a great threat, but if we cooperate, we will surely be able to eliminate him. I feel that such cooperation will be very important to you. The expression in Salom's eyes became deep but readable. He was indeed a little enticed by this deal. Ezra Zephyr was too mysterious and will definitely become a huge problem, and even bigger theirs than Jon Stark and the rest. As for whether working together with those from the upper realm would invoke the ire of the other prided geniuses of the Naren continent, Salom did not need to take it into consideration. There was nothing he would not stoop to in order to walk the path of the strong. Salom said in a low voice, although Ezra Zephyr has not yet reached the core formation stage, he is a complete mystery. Even if we do manage to defeat him, we may not be able to eliminate him. The two of us may not be able to, but what if we add another two? Rolo or smiled faintly. The moment these words were said, Salom equally sensed spiritual energy waves erupt from the surroundings. Next, two figures rose into the sky and landed around him. These two figures were extremely young, but the powerful spiritual energy ripples spread from their bodies, making Salom's pupils shrink in fear. The two of them were likely not weaker than Fair Sword. It seems that the upper realm had come prepared, their goal, the greatest blessing. There was a change in Salom's expression. Even though he was currently surrounded by three people, he did not display any fear. If he wanted to leave, there would naturally be a way, he thought. The genius of the second branch Ukuli clan slowly said, if it's now, I believe it should be enough. Such a lineup could only be described as terrifying. No matter how mysterious Ezra Zephyr was, once he was trapped in their net, escape would practically be impossible. Rolo or softly chuckled. Since that is so, our alliance is temporarily established. However, there is something else that we'll need your help with after. Salom asked as he squinted his eyes, what is it? These teammates of mine are rather interested in the super elite geniuses of your Naren continent and plan to use them to leave their names on the tablet. Salom indifferently responded, I can lead the way, but they are no kind saints either. It is not certain who will end up trampling who in the end. Of course, the best outcome would be for both parties to end up injured. There is no need for you to worry about such matters. Rolo shook his head. Soon after, he looked towards Salom and smiled, are you not worried that our upper realm will take all the top places, making the prided geniuses of your Naren continent lose all their face? Salom thought about it for a moment. What does that got to do with me? Rolo was stunned but soon began to laugh. I hope we'll have a happy alliance. 8 days had already passed since the battle between Ezra Zephyr and Ixtal Malark. During these 8 days, the spirity bailiwick gradually began boiling with activity. More and more opportunities were appearing in the form of various mystical areas where anyone who could successfully enter would obtain some pretty good treasures or blessings. Over the past few days, news had already spread of several lucky individuals obtaining various treasures, allowing them to be completely reborn, their originally mediocre strength leaping into the sky, transforming them into elites even amongst the many prided geniuses. This caused the eyes of countless geniuses to burn with excitement and anticipation. For a time, searching for these mystical places became the most sought-after dream of everyone here. Of course, this naturally led to numerous intense battles from which some geniuses were able to distinguish themselves, making their names resound loudly across the spirity bailiwick. Included amongst them were various famous elites who fought to get something precious. However, when compared to Ezra Zephyr, all of them appeared insignificant. Till today, only his name and the names of 13 other Bloodfang Kingdom's martial masters could be seen on the spirity tablet. It was clear as day that achieving the so-called distinguished battle accomplishment was not easy at all. As such, everyone put their energy and time into training, killing many beasts to raise their strength. Only then would they raise their chances of being acknowledged by the tablet. BBZZZZZ. The land rumbled. It was a barren land where mountains gathered together in groups, their tall peaks piercing the clouds. No trees could be found on these mountains, their bare appearance making the place look rather desolate. Terrifying gales were present at the peaks of these mountains all year round, the endlessly rumbling thunder filling the area. The Prince of Bloodfang Kingdom currently stood on one of these majestic mountains. The top of the mountain was immersed in colorful auroras, surrounded by the speedy wind in which black lightning madly flashed and flickered. It was a sight that would make one's heart jump and flesh tremble. However, Ezra Zephyr's face was overflowing with joy. This was the best place to master the Gamma Layer glittering wind and light skill. Took too many days to find a perfect place. The prince sighed. He would surely master the skill here. Once he did, his battle power would rise once again. He sat down on the mountain peak and gradually began to fall into a state of concentration. The rumbling thunder that filled the area seemed to gradually fade away into the background. A complex and profound intonation slowly flowed into his mind. It was the cultivation method of the glittering wind and light skill. Feel the wild wind, feel the particles of twinkling light, infuse your spiritual energy, converge into a mark. It was a long time later before Ezra's eyes slowly opened. He closed his hand as the lightning rod stone appeared within it. The black stone slowly rose into the air, ultimately hovering some distance above his head. The prince began to pour his chaos force into the stone, immediately causing a peculiar cry of thunder to faintly echo from its many holes. CRRAACKKLE. The wind and light in the vicinity began to move as if being beckoned by something. With a loud boom, a foot-long black lightning bolt struck the lightning rod stone. The stone trembled as it absorbed the lightning. After which, lightning began spouting out of its many holes, bombarding Ezra's body. The prince's body immediately began to shake, the flesh all over his body squirming as intense pain pulsed from the surface of his body. But Ezra didn't grimace in pain. He had endured a lot worse during his training for 5 whole years. Only by experiencing wind and light attacks would the body gradually grow accustomed to them, allowing one to gain a better understanding of their nature and properties, and eventually create a twinkling mark on one's body. A gamma layer skill was profoundly powerful, an existence far beyond the realm of beta layer skill. Hence why the method to learn was even stranger and more difficult. It is fortunate that I have chaos force that is keeping the wind and light in check and can continuously absorb them. Otherwise, the process would be much slower. Muttered the prince to himself. WWHOHHHSH. The gale blew endlessly on the mountain top. Within the glaring lightning, one would faintly see Zhou Yuan's sitting figure. Deep within the forest, a swordsman was dressed in white, leaning against the trunk of the tree, legs stretched over the branch. His hands full of calluses appeared exceptionally rough when he opened them. He gently rested as he retrieved a cup from his spatial pouch and extended it into a hole in the tree. When the cup exited, it was filled with green liquid that gave off the strong and fragrant smell of good wine. Ha, never expected to encounter such good stuff here. John took a little sip. A satisfied smile was revealed on his face that was filled with various slashes of swords. Woff, WOFF. A group of hounds that had bodies of apes angrily grunted below the tree but did not dare to approach. They could only work themselves into a fluster, screeching unceasingly. I'm only going to have a little. Upon hearing the din, John Stark tilted his head downwards and looked at them before continuing, but if you keep disturbing me, I'll drink all of your good stuff. The loud noise instantly turned to silence, the hairs all over the apes' bodies standing as they clumped together trembling. At this very moment, they could feel that the human before their eyes was very scary and he could really drink everything. So obedient. John Stark gave a faint nod of approval, raising his neck again as he downed an entire cup of alcohol. As he casually threw the cup away, sharpness slowly gathered in his clear eyes as he indifferently said, "It seems that this beautiful wine has caught the attention of you all as well." A figure descended some distance in front of him. He played with two golden balls in his hands. Who could it be other than Salom and Ixtal? He stood on the leaves that carpeted the ground, his body completely still as he stared at John Stark and slowly said, "The fair sword of humanity? I need to learn about the locations of all elite geniuses. If you chose to help us, I will allow you to leave today." John Stark looked at him. He was calm like a lake. "I don't want to waste my energy on you. Please leave." "What did you say?" Salom and Ixtal's gaze turned frosty as an astonishing aura spread from his body. John Stark sighed. He touched the sheathed sword of his as he said, "You are not amongst the top geniuses of this year. What exactly it is that made you act so bold before me? Looks like you're tired of living." Anger seemed to surge in Salom's eyes. His ice-cold voice was filled with chilling murder. "It's only been some days in Spirity Bailiwick, but it seems that you've already forgotten the man known as Fair Sword." A white light began to flicker on John's finger as a powerful chi ripple spread. "Hee, what a sharp spiritual energy." A raspy voice suddenly rang out within the forest. One could only watch as a figure in loincloth slowly walked out some distance behind Salom. It was Rolo, or the one who came from the upper realm. "Are you guys, right?" John Stark turned his head slightly and stole a glance at Rolo. "Or I did not expect that the genius of the Ixtal clan and trespassers from the upper realm would work together." Salom was surprised. How did he know they are from the upper realm? He pondered. Rolo sighed softly. "Amongst the younger generation in this lower realm, I've never seen someone whose sword chi and insight are as strong as yours. Ezra Zephyr is interesting, but he is totally different from you. That's why, to eliminate uncertainty, I feel that you should no longer appear in the Spirity Bailiwick. You and your righteous nature will become our greatest obstruction." The Fair Sword was not astonished that they are aware of Ezra, but he was curious about what made them utter such words about Ezra Zephyr. There were other elite geniuses superior to Ezra, such as Strike Beast Empire's prince, battle-addicted dwarf, and that princess of Elfpatria. All of a sudden, his interest in Ezra reached new heights. John Stark stood up on the tree branch. His slim steel-like figure seemed rather domineering at this moment as he calmly said, "The combination of you two is indeed very strong, but you may not be able to keep me here." Rolo chuckled as he nodded. "Then what about now?" His hands reached out and gently clapped. SWWOSSSHH. Two powerful spiritual energies suddenly exploded from the forest, sweeping away the surrounding trees. They formed a mana barrier that trapped John Stark from far away. The Fair Sword shot a glance at his surroundings. This time, however, his brows slowly knitted together. To think that the other party had sent out such a lineup to deal with him, a lineup that was capable of killing the Fair Sword. CRACCLLEE. Black thunderclouds spat dark snake-like lightning, each bolt striking the black lightning rod stone. In turn, the stone emitted wind and light attributes that poured onto the seated prince of Bloodfang Kingdom below. Every time the wind and light power descended, Ezra's body would tremble uncontrollably. Although he was already numb to the intense pain, his body would subconsciously react. Ezra Zephyr's eyes were tightly shut, ignoring the pain from his body. After several days of training in this matter, he had already grown used to the strong winds and piercing lights. At this current moment, all his attention was on the interior of his body. Powerful spiritual energy surged within his body where the faint glow of twinkling light could be seen. Along with the blooming light, the sound of rustling wind could be heard. Light particles flicker as the wind blew, the two forces weaving into one while absorbing wisps of chaos lightning force from time to time. Slowly, the amalgamation seemed to transform into a mystical mark. This mark was similar to light and wind and looked as if it was naturally formed. It was also extremely cryptic and profound. A mark like this was known as a skill mark similar to spell formula. Such a mark could only be obtained through special cultivation methods. Once formed, it would be imprinted on the inner core like a seed of sorts. In future, one would only need to fuse spiritual energy into the mark to activate the skill. However, it was clearly much simpler to successfully imprint a lower layer skill mark. The difficulty was substantially greater for the skill that has the level of gamma layer and required extremely high talent and comprehension ability. It was rumored that the great powers were masters of innumerable skills and spells. Their arsenals were akin to the starry sky, while powerful spell after spell and skill after skill easily flowed from their hands. After these great powers died, their techniques could be left behind through the power of their wills. Just like the spirity bailiwick where spiritual blessings, treasures, skills and spells existed within the bodies of the native beasts and martial animals. The glittering wind and light skill mark that the prince had just managed to acquire was only at the elementary stage. To perfect it, one needed to keep exposing one's body to wind and light and gain an increasing understanding of the power within. Boom. Ezra's tightly shut eyes abruptly opened at this moment, the glow of twinkling light flashing within them. His hands curled slightly and were placed together at the base of the palm, one on top, one on the bottom as if he was cupping the sun or moon. Meanwhile, the small mark in his inner core began to vibrate. SWWIISCHHU. A glow emerged as the light began shimmering between Ezra Zephyr's palms, starting off as a tiny dot that rapidly swelled in response to the influx of spiritual energy, transforming into a foot-wide colorful ball. Violent ripples pulsed from the surface of the shining wind ball. Ezra's hands were flung forward, shooting the colorful wind ball. Its speed was astonishingly fast, traveling 100 feet in a flash before slamming into a mountain peak. Boom. The entire mountain peak instantly collapsed, boulders tumbling down. Its destructive power was insane. As expected of a gamma layer skill, Ezra Zephyr was highly impressed by the skill's destructive power. He had merely been trying to test it earlier and had not used his full power. However, the resultant destructive power was already greater than his expectation. This was the first cultivation skill of Ezra Zephyr that he has used apart from mana spells. A smile surfaced on the prince's face. Glittering wind and light had not disappointed him after all. The time spent being slashed by wind and light had not been wasted. Now that I have learnt the glittering wind and light skill, my battle power has risen once again, mumbled the prince to himself. He would be able to put up a fight even if against encountered those apex geniuses now. BBZZZZZ. While the prince was mumbling to himself, he suddenly sensed some activity from the spirity tablet in the sky. He immediately lifted his head and saw rays of light converging on the tablet. This sight caused Ezra Zephyr's pupils to shrink. When the spirity tablet acted in this manner, it meant that changes were being made to it. Let's see who will be leaving a name on the tablet this time. Under the werewolf's attention, light swept across the tablet and ancient words gradually appeared. First level core formation stage, Salom equally. Upper realm, first level core formation stage, Rolo or. The first two lines that had appeared stunned Ezra Zephyr. He knew who Salom equally was, but who was Rolo or? The upper realm? He wasn't from our realm? How had he entered the spirity bailiwick? Ezra frowned. A bombardment of questions was unleashed in his head. A split second later, however, His expression instantly changed when he saw the words that appeared behind the two names, an image of curiosity abruptly gushing out in his eyes. First-level core formation stage experts Salom and Rolo joined hands against first-level core formation stage John Stark. John Stark, injured. Ezra gazed at the tablet, a voice rang in his head, and the monstrous wolf of Norse finally broke his silence. Boy. I believe that guys are seeds of the upper realm. Seeds? Ezra questioned. Yes, a seed to rule and control part of the lower realm, that can give them more talented people in the upper realm after ascending there. A look of graveness appeared on Ezra's face, only this time, he felt a real threat in spirity Bailiwick. How strong do you think they would be? Probably first level of core formation stage, but the problem would be their martial spirits. If they are from above, they'll have grade 7 martial spirits at least. Ezra raised a brow as he uttered, and at most? 8th grade martial spirit, they cannot train anyone with above martial spirit, higher the grade, faster the growth. I can assure you that regardless of their looks, they would be around the age of 17 and below. An 8th grade martial spirit. Ezra stared at the tablet. The signature grin formed on his face. The fair sword of humanity was a fine warrior, righteous and strong. We need more like him and... He squinted his eyes, focusing on two names Salom and Rolo as he continued. Less of them. You are going to engage them, boy? Asked the wolf. Am I not obligated to? That human helped me, and his nature will prove to be helpful in future. The prince chuckled as he looked below, around 149 martial masters of Bloodfang Kingdom, ready at his signal to wage another war. In the face of apex-prided geniuses, though John's martial prowess was strong, he was still an individual, and against someone from the upper realm, he did amazing to get out with some injuries. Fair sword is injured, your majesty. He helped us, we need to find him immediately. Thur's complexion was ashen. He said as soon as Ezra leapt off the mountaintop, the black bolts of chaos appearing beneath his feet while he landed. Thur was worried that his prince will be in danger when they encountered Ixtal Malark. In his eyes, John came as a hero who protected his prince, and yet he had now been injured. If anything were to happen to him, Thur would spend his whole life regretting it. That was the nature of their Gale arms. Ezra didn't make any expression, he opened his mouth to say. We will avenge the fair sword, the spirity Bailiwick will be their grave. When Ezra Zephyr saw the changes on the spirity tablet, the numerous prided geniuses in the entire spirity Bailiwick were also shown the two names on it, causing them to immediately explode into a din that reached into the sky. Salom has also left his name on the tablet? But who the heck is Rolo or? Holy shit, it's someone from the upper realm? The spirity Bailiwick is a blessing of our lower realm. How did these upper realm people sneak in? Are they planning on snatching our blessing? Salom should be ashamed of himself. To think that he actually worked together with those from the upper realm to deal with fair sword of all geniuses. I originally thought he was a remarkable individual. Can't believe that he is actually so unscrupulous. Doesn't even try to be at least a little bit honorable. When he can't win, he gangs up with outsiders. He is indeed shameless. If I meet him, I will definitely spit on his face. The voices flooded every corner of the spirity Bailiwick. Everyone was shocked by the information revealed on the spirity tablet. Of course, the thing that filled them with the most indignation was the one from the upper realm, Rolo or. Did this not mean that the powerhouses of the upper realm had already infiltrated the spirity Bailiwick? Their target was definitely to snatch away the Naren continent's blessings. It seems that the waters in the spirity Bailiwick were exceptionally deep this time. Salom and Rolo stood on the mountain peak, spiritual energy surging within their eyes as their sharp gazes scanned the vast mountain range. Swiwish, swish. Two figures jumped over, landing in front of them. Can't find him, said each of the two individuals. Salom frowned, but his tone remained indifferent as he said, we paid quite a substantial price previously, exchanging wound for a wound in order to critically injure John Stark. Our advantage lies in our majority of numbers, which gives us strong power, allowing us to gradually handle the attacks no matter how grave. In contrast, Jon Stark's body is weak, and his current state is when he is at his weakest. Since we've already done the deed, we need to be sure to do a thorough job. We cannot give him any chance to recover, or all of us will be threatened. Rolo nodded as he smiled and said, "Well spoken, brother Salom, since we've already done it, we cannot leave any loose ends. As such, I will no longer hold back." He grinned as he raised his gray pupils. Vortexes seemed to spin within them as the world before his eyes began to change. Everything turned to a shade of dull gray, the magnificent mountain forests now translucent. Glowing forms appeared within, each glow representing the light of mana. There were countless beasts in the forests. Hence, Rolo skipped over these balls of light in search of the less visible spiritual energy. After several minutes, his eyes finally paused. Far towards the north was an extremely faint spiritual energy glow. Its rays were practically non-existent and would be easily overlooked if one was not careful. Found him. A drop of blood flowed down from Rolo's shut eyes. Activating this spell was clearly detrimental to his eyes. Go. However, he ignored it, taking the lead as he shot towards the north. Salom and the rest immediately followed. Meanwhile, a slender figure had come to a stop in a certain forest far away, his white clothes dipped in blood. It was the fair sort of humanity, Jon Stark. His pretty face appeared extremely pale, but there was no panic between his brows, only an increasing indifference. "I've been found, huh?" he muttered to himself in a low voice as he firmly grasped the scroll in his hand. Light spread from the scroll and enveloped his body, concealing his presence. However, he did not expect that the other party would be so resourceful too and still able to detect him. Boom. A berserk spiritual energy ripple suddenly soared in the sky before descending, ferociously blasting towards Jon. Jon nimbly darted to the side, avoiding the blast. He raised his head, only to find 4 dazzling figures shooting towards him from the sky, the faces of Salom equally, Rolo and the rest already visible. "Fair sword, your strong sword will not last for long. It will be best for you to give up and allow yourself to be captured." Rolo's raspy voice echoed from far away. However, Jon ignored him. Yet another scroll appeared in his hand and was torn. Swish. Light covered Jon's body, the space around him distorting for a moment before he disappeared, appearing 1,000 feet away a split second later. Rolo's and Salom's gazes shivered upon seeing this as they remarked inside, "Can't believe he has also possessed short-range instant teleportation spiritual imprints, what frightening fellow, he is prepared." They exchanged a look, seeing the intensifying killing intent in each other's eyes. Such instant teleportation is based on traveling through space and will place stress on the body. He has not much of spiritual energy left and definitely will not be able to keep this up for long. We cannot let him escape. Chi exploded beneath Salom's foot as he dashed forward. As Salom took the lead, a voice came. "Rolo, why are we asking that fool for help? Any one of us can kill him and you are enough strong to eliminate that sword guy alone, why are we acting as weak?" The lady asked, her name was Rima. "We don't know anything about this place, and there are 2 dangerous guys that can kill us if we don't kill them first," said Rolo in a grave manner. "Who they could be?" "My brother, Carlo, and Prince of Bloodfang Kingdom," replied Rolo. Then Rolo said something that made the eyes of the other 2 as wide as possible for them. After saying that, mana formed beneath Rolo's feet and he jumped, the other duo followed him. Their speed rapidly soaring as they continued to give chase. One group chased while one figure fled, crossing only God knows how many mountains in half a day. However, Salom and Rolo remained extremely persistent and stubborn, unrelentless in their chase without even a second to relax. Some distance to their front, Jon's face grew increasingly pale, the chase draining a huge portion of his chi. No one discovered that the iciness in Jon's bright eyes was growing colder and colder, while the ancient symbol on his sword gradually became more and more radiant. All of a sudden, Jon seemed to lose his patience, his figure suddenly coming to a halt. "He's on his last legs." Salom was overjoyed, his body arriving some distance behind John with one final spurt, while the other three moved to surround him from all directions. Salom said, finally ready to accept your fate. John raised his head, his face emotionless as he gazed at Salom, and replied, do you really believe that the reason why you are able to live for so long is because of your ability? I merely promised someone that I will take any life in Spirity Bailiwick. Salom Uquali's expression darkened. Still so confident even at death's door. The scars on his body started to gleam, and his scarred face filled with anger. However, I feel that you're too detestable, so my promise to that person shall no longer be valid. His face was expressionless, while the ancient rune on his sword began to give off a faint glow. Something's not right, kill him! Shouted the genius of the second branch Uquali clan as he frowned. The two immediately threw a punch, berserk mana whizzing forth to viciously attack John Stark. John's face was filled with destructive motives as he watched the rapidly expanding mana attack, a long slender épée reaching towards his unprotected forehead. The air was filled with the faint feeling that something terrifying was about to be released. I knew, I shouldn't have made that promise, John said as he let himself succumb to death. The épée seemed to scream as it approached. However, when the épée was still half a finger from his head, a figure suddenly appeared like a phantom, grabbing John Stark in one fluid motion as it broke through the encirclement with a flash of green. Stop him! Yelled Rolo, he was the first to react. The two upper realm geniuses did not hesitate, quick as lightning as they pounced at the green light. Hee hee. Lovely tinkling laughter spread from within the green light. One could only watch as the green light flashed, like a fish as it swam past the encirclement of the two, displaying a godly movement technique that dazzled the eyes. The green light did not stop after escaping, disappearing into the vast sea of trees in several flickers. Only at this moment did Salom's attack finally land on the empty space, ripping and tearing apart the ground. Rolo's expression was rather stormy. He did not expect such a turn of events when they were just about to succeed. Even he was shocked by the green light's speed. Who is that? Pretty decent strength, but that speed is really amazing. Rolo looked towards Salom Uquali. Although it had only been a few brief moments, the former had already gauged that though the green light's strength was decent, it was still within manageable levels. That speed, however, would leave even him in amazement. Salom's ugly face stared at the direction the green light had disappeared. A long time later, a chillingly furious voice hissed from between the cracks of his teeth. Damned fairy Hololeth! By the edge of a stream, a green light flashed past as two figures appeared. One was wearing a green dress, her figure enchanting, while her bewitching face was akin to a little succubus. This was naturally the princess of Elfpatria, Fairy Hololeth. A perfect example of the beauty and the beast. She said as she looked at John's face full of scars. John's face was pale as he sat on a rock, one of his hands was pressed against his chest where a gash had appeared. However, his expression had remained cool and collected from start to end. He lifted his head, and was silent for some time as he looked at Fairy Hololeth, before he said, if you did not come, all of them would have been dead now. Huh? Fairy Hololeth was stunned. Soon after, her little red lips pouted. Insisting on saving face even till death. You shouldn't feel humiliated though. No one else in the entire Naren continent's younger generation can handle the powerhouses from the upper realm. What lies above is still a mystery for everyone. She thought John Stark was just being stubborn contrary to his character. John Stark shook his head, deciding not to explain. However, he gave Fairy Hololeth a faint nod as he said, however, I should still give my thanks. Upon hearing Fair Sword's thanks, the princess giggled. Her eyes seemed to spin in thought as she looked towards the injury in John's chest, before she seated herself a hand's length away and said in a gentle voice, You're injured, shall I help you clean your wound? John could not help but smile and say, I'm not worthy to be treated by the Fairy of Elpatria. His relationship with Fairy was not that good before, they were called rivals by the continent. There were also multiple occasions when humans and elves fought to the death. Why? Fairy pouted as she unhappily said, Am I not a good healer? I'm just trying to be nice and friendly to everyone, despite their origins. Huh, you don't know just how many people are dying to get treated by me. John helplessly shook his head before saying, "Help me apply some medicine, Your Highness." Fairy darted over with a swish, her eyes glowing as she stared at the steel-like body of Fair Sword. He was born handsome, but his training and spars gave him numerous ugly wounds. The elf princess hastily withdrew her gaze, retrieved a bag of medicine and began properly applying some ointment for John. "Have we lost them?" asked the Fair Sword. Fairy pridefully answered, "Relax, though I admittedly cannot beat them in a real fight. If we were to talk about escaping, even those upper realm invaders will only be able to eat my dust. I believe that they can't even find a single trace of us now, so we are absolutely safe." John gave a slight nod. "I'll rest for a few days and call all the humans participating in Spirity Bailiwick." "What after?" John stared at the clear waters of the stream. The scarred face reflected in its waters grinned slightly as a murderous intention was revealed. "Make them pay, of course." In a mountain forest far from where Fairy Hololaph and John Stark were located. Rolo's expression was rather ugly as his gaze fell upon the seemingly endless mountain forests, blood appearing from the corner of his eye. It was obvious that he was using his searching eye technique again. "Can't find them?" Upon seeing his expression, Salom's heart sunk slightly. Rolo nodded. "She is too quick and has already thrown us off long ago. I can no longer find her." Salom's expression was frosty as he sent a punch towards the giant tree in front of him, blowing it into splinters to release the fury in his heart. They pretty much had no option left but to exchange injury for injury to hurt John Stark, creating a chance like that would be very difficult to find again in future. And yet, the Fair Sword had still been allowed to escape. This would undoubtedly become a huge danger to them. Rolo and his two companions were strangely calm while Salom equally was raging up. Rolo shook his head and said, "We cannot do anything about him now. It will be better to first let them leave their names on the Spirity tablet." He looked towards the two figures behind them. Salom equally indifferently said, "Are you certain it will not end up benefiting the top-tier prided geniuses of the Naren continent instead?" Behind Rolo the fiery red long-haired girl from amongst the two laughed when she heard this and said, "Actually, you can personally try us." It was Rima, her words were filled with provocation, clearly unafraid of Salom equally. "How can anyone decent come from a place as tiny as the lower realm? The elders and others have gone senile." The one who had spoken was a metal tower-like youth. Glowing imprints were faintly visible on his muscular body, while a trace of disdain was revealed on his face. "Shut up, both of you," retorted Rolo. Salom's expression remained indifferent, with no anger whatsoever, as if he was aware of that beforehand. "That's good, since there will be no one to collect your body when you'll be beaten to death after all of Naren continent join hands against you." After speaking, his figure moved, stepping in the air as he jumped into the sky. The eyes of the two upper realm geniuses turned icy and were about to stop him, but they saw Rolo wave his hand, stopping them instead. "There's no meaning in a battle of tongues. Use your actions to show your worth." Rolo gazed at Salom's figure as he continued in a nonchalant voice, "The super elite prided geniuses are the mental pillar of the Naren continent's younger generation. We only need to defeat them to destroy their morale, making it such that they would naturally no longer have any thoughts with regards to the blessings of the Spirity Bailiwick. That's why." He softly chuckled at the two individuals, a chuckle from which sinister chilling news flowed. "From now onwards, we shall let those from the lower realm tremble under the shadow of our Los Filipinas. SWWIISSHH. Dark gold chi shot across the horizon, eventually landing on a certain mountaintop as the Galarm's figure was revealed. His expression was rather dark and stormy. During the day-long journey he took to rush here, he constantly tried to ask for information but did not discover any news about John Stark. The Spirity Bailiwick was just too vast. Continuing to search like a headless fly is far too ineffective. There frowned. To obtain more information, he had to go where many were gathered. On the way here, the people in this area have been heading towards the southwest direction where a scaled pond is said to have appeared. The pond is extremely mysterious and is rumored to be the materialization of a top-tier blessing. It had strange protective scales. He said to the 10 martial masters of Bloodfang, who were with him. There should be many geniuses there, making it a hub of information. If I head there, I should be able to obtain news regarding Fair Sword. Dur's eyes flickered. Without any further hesitation, his dark gold chi surged as he once again transformed into a ray of dark gold light that dashed into the sky. After a few minutes, the tablet shined again. First level core formation stage, Victor Benedict defeated and injured 6th level chi brightening stage, Argus Waska. The name and description wreaked havoc in Spirity Bailiwick. A core formation expert was recognized by defeating a chi brightening stage? What kind of bullshit is this? That's unfair. Every core formation expert can defeat chi brightening newbie. Now I'm 100% sure that the tablet is broken. The names were read by Bloodfang members as well. Sheer anger arose in Ezra's eyes. His chaos force surged as numerous bolts scattered from his body, torturing the surrounding without any discrimination. He said nothing and jumped into the sky, followed by black lightning. A continuous mountain range appeared within Ezra's sights. Thick fog lingered in the sky above it all year round, making it impossible to clearly see the situation inside. Faint spiritual energy waves were also present within the mist, spreading an aura of danger. However, if one was to peer past the endless fog, one would seem to see a mysterious light fading and appearing at its deepest depths. This shitty place has nothing except mountains, forests, lakes, and mists. He scoffed. On the fringe of the mountain range, countless figures were pouring in from all directions, creating a lineup that appeared rather magnificent. Evidently, news of the scaled pool had already spread. Ezra was receiving the news as well. Coincidentally, he was near that pond. The prince's figure headed directly to the edge of the mountain range. He did not dare to land in the fog, cautious that he might draw the attention of some unknown creature. His figure landed in the forest. This was the outer region of the mountain range, and several figures could be seen flying towards the mountains. He too followed, occasionally stopping individuals to inquire about Argus and John. After some time, he managed to gather a bit more information. However, the majority only mentioned that they had caught glimpses of Salom Ixtal and his group chasing someone, but did not know the rough direction or location. This caused Ezra's eyebrows to raise and ponder. The prince did not slow down, the surrounding mists growing thicker and thicker around him. He could hear numerous roars and howls echoing from far away, while faint but violent spiritual energy waves pulsed from time to time. Ezra flew out of the forest as a plane emerged in front of him. However, his footsteps suddenly came to a stop, because a figure had appeared some distance to his front. There were faint dragon-like pictures on the figure's black clothes, while an extremely strange aura emanated from him, causing an unsettledness to fill the surrounding air. He wore a straw hat and held a scythe in his hands. Ezra squinted as he gazed at the figure. He noticed that the left side of his athletic body was emitting heat while the right side seemed to be frostbitten. Ezra was more than prepared for a fight, but the figure did not say anything and turned around to leave. However, just as he turned around, the figure lifted his right hand and the chilling mana suddenly shot out. The mana released a piercing hiss, cold as ice as it swept towards Ezra Zephyr. The prince sent a punch backwards as black bolts of chaos surged, and thundered the air as they scattered the cold white mana. When the icy mana was scattered, Ezra Zephyr felt icy energy invade his body, slowing the flow of blood and causing his flesh to turn rigid wherever it passed. However, just as the icy white mana was about to take another step, black lightning force whizzed out, devouring it in a single gulp. Oh? The figure let out a faint cry of surprise. Ezra's brows were tightly knitted together as he looked towards the figure and asked, "Who are you?" He was curious about the martial spirit of that person. There was a high chance that he belongs to the upper realm. If he really is, then he will die at this very spot. That's what Ezra was planning. He did not seem to know this person, but since the latter had attacked at their first encounter, meaning he was clearly here for Ezra Zephyr, giving him more reason to kill. The figure slowly turned around, only to reveal the extremely pale face of a young man. It was as if all the blood had been drained from him. However, he had an athletic body and eyes of ashen color, but when he used mana, they both glowed differently. The right one glowed faint ice blue, and the left one had faint but bright orange color, as if a huge amount of bubbling lava resides in it. He coughed softly, before he slowly said, "Cult of Jinns, XYR. XYR? Ezra Zephyr was in ponder. Soon after, he scanned the other party's complexion as he nodded his head and said, "XYR, with no last name?" The pale youth was expressionless as he stared at the prince. Ezra Zephyr stepped forward. "Sorry for the misunderstanding. Does the honorable next Jinn of the Cult of Jinns have nothing better to do than to come here and stop me? I believe there is no grudge between us." The prince said, he heard about the Cult of Jinns, that they send their next leader called Jinn to experience battle against other geniuses. The youth called XYR flatly said, "The Cult of Jinns owes the Ukulele clan a debt of gratitude." Only then did the prince understand. It turns out that it was a helper enlisted by Salom Ukulele. What a capable fellow, to think that he would be able to employ even an apex-level prided genius like the next Jinn. Ezra curiously asked, "How did you find me?" Someone else's universe pouch should not be taken so casually. XYR's tone was completely calm, devoid of any feeling. Ezra squinted his eyes. He had the universe bag of Sky Lee's, not Salom Ukulele. Ezra Zephyr nodded, "So that was how," he said, even though he only got a faint idea. XYR shot a look at Ezra and said, "You will cause tremendous problems for the son of the second branch elder of the Ukulele clan. That's why I have to capture you and bring you back to the elder's son, Salom Ukulele." There was always a hint of eeriness in his voice, an eeriness that made one shiver all over. Be that as it may, that eeriness had no effect on the werewolf. XYR said indifferently, "I do not have time to bother with the grudge between you two. I only need to capture you and bring you towards Salom. After which, the Cult of Jinns and Ukulele clan will no longer owe each other anything. I said I'm going to capture you, I did not say that I have to obtain your permission." At the final word, XYR's body suddenly shot forward like a phantom, pouncing straight at Ezra Zephyr. The hands tightened their grip as the scythe was about to cut. The scythe had a whitish hue, while a terrifying stench seemed to circle it. Sharp scythe slashed, tearing even the air itself. Ezra's eyes narrowed, but he did retreat. 5 fingers tightly clenched into a fist, black lightning of chaos force surging as a punch was sent flying. Its power was so great that the thick leaves beneath his feet were shredded to pieces. Boom! Fist and scythe collided as 2 different spiritual energies clashed, instantly cracking the ground below their feet. Third circle spell, Frost Poison. An icy look flitted across XYR's eyes as a chilling light appeared on his right hand's fingertips and quickly covered the blade of the scythe, viciously slicing the arm of Ezra Zephyr. Frost poison was contained in the scythe and would invade the flesh of anyone that came into contact with it. Scrrech. However, his scythe did not draw blood but a spluttering of sparks. The attack was stopped by invisible bracers on Ezra's arms. "Like to play with poison? Then have a taste of mine." Ezra wickedly chuckled as his hand thrust forward. The poisonous hook, Dripa, snaked out, shining in purple as it went towards XYR's head with a swish. The sudden attack and reach of Dripa caught XYR off guard, but he parried the attack. However, a small cut was left on his neck. XYR's eyes narrowed slightly. He knew at first contact that this was a strange poison. He did not dare to let it spread inside of him, quickly poking the vitals of the area to stop the poison's circulation. Hush hush. Out of nowhere, another type of mana surrounded the left side of XYR, a mana consisting of magma. Dripa's poison was gradually poured out. Boom. A blast of powerful mana occurred, snapping the wastes of the nearby trees, while XYR's figure was thrown backwards. However, the instant XYR's body was sent flying backwards, his expression suddenly turned graver as he caught sight of the flash-like spiritual energy sweeping towards him from the corner of his right eye, creating shining lights on the ground wherever it passed. Fourth circle spell, Volcanic Slash. A bright orange mana attack was sent out by XYR as an aura of lava surged out. The green leaves on the ground were turned to dust when the orange mana passed by. The attack tore through the flashy light attack. Ezra was shocked. 2 types of mana. XYR turned his head slightly, his expression somewhat grim as he stared at the forest to his right. Moments later, a figure, holding a spear, slowly walked out. Ezra Zephyr's eyes also fell upon the figure, and he immediately recognized it. Spearman of Elf Patria. Baron, was it? An elf with a head full of long hair beamed as he walked out from the forest wearing fancy armor, a mocking look in his eyes as he looked at Ezra and said, "You're really unlucky, always being attacked wherever you go." He then turned towards the pale XYR. "And always by such troublesome individuals." The prince chuckled, somewhat surprised as he responded, "I did not expect to meet you here." On Baron's shoulder was resting his spear. He held the spear and uttered, "The Scaled Pool's blessing is not small. Of course, I am here to try my luck." As the two spoke, XYR's brows knitted together slightly. He too did not expect that Baron would suddenly appear. He knew that the latter was also an apex-level genius of the Naren continent, and was not the slightest bit inferior to himself. That's why he alone was tasked to protect the princess, which is also an apex genius. In the earlier exchange with Ezra Zephyr, the latter displayed a strength that secretly shocked XYR. Now that there was another individual that was no weaker than himself, he would not have much of an advantage in a 2 versus 1 situation. XYR stared at Baron and asked, "You intend to interfere?" Baron shook his head as he answered, "Nope, you guys can fight, I will just be over here watching." XYR frowned, evidently unconvinced by Baron's words. This man was too eccentric and as wily as a fox. It was very possible that he would suddenly sneak an attack while they were locked in battle. Just like what had happened previously. Hence, XYR took in a deep breath, eyes flickering slightly before he decisively turned around and left. Given the current situation, there was clearly no way to continue. Since that was so, it was only a waste of time to stay. Sigh, going just like that. Baron was stunned by XYR's sudden departure. Soon after, he looked towards Ezra with eagerness as he suggested, "How about we work together to stop him?" The prince shook his head. "I'm not interested in chasing someone who I don't consider a threat, and there's a more important matter I have." And what?" asked Baron. "That guy is much stronger than you," said Ezra as he gazed at the area where XYR went. Baron shook his head, ignoring Ezra as if he was a meaningless babbler. As one that was also called apex-level geniuses of the Naren continent, XYR was clearly no ordinary individual. In addition, the relationship between them had not reached the extent where they would be forced into a battle to death. Baron nodded his chin. "Dead face guy might appear pale and weak, but he is indeed very difficult to kill. Rumor says that his body has gone through an extremely cruel refinement process that, as long as his 2 heart is intact, even the most serious of injuries will not be fatal." 2 hearts? Ezra was confused. The elf spearman raised his eyebrows in surprise. "You don't know about him?" "He is the next Jinn of the cult of Jinns, some even say he possesses 2 martial spirits and is a highly professional assassin." Astonishment flashed in Ezra's eyes when he heard this. Sure enough, every person who could become an apex-level genius was no simple individual. "Right, have you heard any news about Argus Waska?" the prince suddenly asked. Baron pondered a little before he answered, "Who is that?" Ezra shook his head. "Never mind, what about John Stark?" "You should already know that Salom Uqually is working together with those from the upper realm in order to deal with fair sort of humanity, right?" The prince faintly nodded. "But, I've heard that fair sword met our princess, Her Highness Fairy Hololeth. With that peace-deary princess of ours around, even upper realm invaders will not be able to catch up." Baron indicated that there was no need for Ezra to worry as he wondered why he asked about a human. Her Highness's speed and movement magic are definitely the best amongst the Naren continent's younger generation. Oh? The prince was somewhat amazed. Baron explained, the royal family owns a seventh circle spell called Swimming Fairy, which is also the origin of Her Majesty's name Fairy, which is the alternative of earlier. Most importantly, she was able to master this movement-based seventh circled spell. A movement-based seventh circle spell? Ezra was slightly shocked. That was a seventh circle spell, equivalent to Gamma layer skill. One must know that a sorcerer at this level was extremely rare even in the entire Naren continent. Its profoundness and wondrousness far surpassed the other spells. With Fairy Holorth around, it was impossible for Rolo and Salom to trap Jon Stark again. However, Ezra was still worried about his injured countryman, Argus Waska. I think he should be fine now, I have to go and find another one, said the prince, and began turning around to leave. Hearing Argus was hurt had given him a huge fury. He could not imagine how he could face his grandfather, who has taken Argus as his pupil, if something happened to him. Hi. Baron hurriedly pulled Ezra's arm when he saw this, stopping him as he looked around and said, the spirity bailiwick is huge, how will you find him? If you keep searching around like a headless fly, won't you miss every blessing in here? Ezra could not track Argus, the compass could only specify Ezra Zephyr with a red. The rest of Bloodfawn Kingdom's martial masters were shown in green dots, and no one knew who was who. It is enough as long as I have the blessings I need. If it is fate, they will naturally come. Ezra Zephyr was rather open-minded, he knew too much greed can kill him. And what blessing would defeat the treasures he had in his cave? Baron's eyes widened. They seemed to swivel in thought for a moment, before he said, I have a better idea. Since so many prided geniuses have gathered here, we should distinguish ourselves and obtain the blessing here. Our names will then begin to spread, and with so many people helping us spread our reputation, it will definitely land in Her Highness's ears sooner or later. Then they will know our location and come to find us. Isn't this more convenient? Ezra Zephyr was taken aback. There was some logic to this method. Soon after, he seemed to smile as he looked towards Baron. It seems that you are very interested in the Golden Pool's blessing? Baron smiled bitterly, he wanted him to stay because he desired a dependable helper. Seeing that upper realm guys have interfered, he had no other choices unless he wants the same fate as that of Jon Stark. Baron nodded, not denying it. Did you know? It's said that the scaled pool is full of wonders. Not only does it possess the power to purify and strengthen the body, but it can also even nourish the martial spirit and temper one's spiritual energy. Most importantly, of course, it can allow a bloodline to return to its ancestral state. Returning a bloodline to its ancestral state? Ezra was stunned. He shot a thoughtful ponder at Mad God Bear and Razor Pearl Eagle in his spell space. Such a function was clearly more useful to martial animals. You are a werewolf, you have beast blood in you. If you can enter the scaled pool, your bloodline will definitely return to its ancestral state, allowing it to grow closer to the state of a higher stage. Baron anxiously looked at Ezra Zephyr. I wonder if my werewolf bloodline will evolve and reach the next possible level. Mumbled the prince to himself inside. A sliver of interest rose within him. You can't reach the scaled pool even with your ability? Asked the werewolf prince. Baron was one of the apex-level geniuses of the Naren continent. His close combat sorcery and spells could not be weak. Baron showed a pained look on his bright handsome face. It's said that there are many second-tier martial animals in the vicinity of the pool. I managed to get close a few days ago, but encountered one of them. It was not easy for me to beat it, but that bastard quickly called over 3 other second-tier martial animals. So many second-tier martial animals? Ezra Zephyr was a little surprised. Normally speaking, a second-tier martial animal was already a tyrant-like figure in the spirity bailiwick. Why had so many of them gathered in this place? I don't know either. I heard that there weren't so many of them here before. Aren't you an elf? Can't you communicate with them? Asked the prince. Bewilderment filled Baron's face. That's right, I am normally able to communicate even if I encounter a second-tier martial animal, but it doesn't work with the martial animals here. However, I managed to obtain some information from a martial animal elsewhere. What information? Baron hesitated for a moment, before he very carefully said, "It seems that these second-tier martial animals have a boss, and it's this boss that called them here from the other mountains." Ezra's eyes squinted in curiosity. These second-tier martial animals had a leader? What grade could command such authority? Who would dare to trespass against such security? Boom. A shockwave of martial animals' force devastated the surrounding forest, towering tree after a tree snapped at their waists, while cracks grew like spider webs on the ground. At the epicenter of the force, a giant multicolored winged tiger roared. Above it, a huge bird flapped its wings, sending ice-cold force sweeping downwards that covered the land in a layer of ice. The tiger opened its mouth as a violent force charged out like a flood, clashing with the icy force. The battle between the two titans could be said to shake the mountains. Ezra, Zephyr and Baron were watching the battle nearby. The ice sparrow-like bird clearly also had second-tier strength that did not lose to the multicolored tiger. However, this tiger does not have a gamma layer skill. It seems that not all second-tier martial animals possess one. Ezra secretly mumbled to himself as he watched the fight. When Baron saw that the two beasts were at a stalemate, he opened his mouth and said, "Werewolf Prince, I'm going to help that sparrow. Help me keep watch." Ezra's nodded with a smile upon hearing this. That smile creeped the elf out. Baron's toes pushed off the ground, his armored body leaping into the air and landing on the ice bird. He reached out a small hand and pressed it against the bird's body. A warm light seemed to flash in the eyes of the bird as it flapped its wings and rose into the sky. Spiritual energy whizzed forth, transforming into countless ice feathers. The ice feathers were sharp without equal and extremely cold. SWWWIISH. The ice feathers seemed to block out the sky as they descended. The tiger raised its head and roared, creating a powerful sound wave. The sound wave fused into its spiritual energy, visible to the naked eye as it spread, shattering any ice feathers in its path. This tiger is a pretty difficult opponent. I can't hide my power while fighting him. Ezra's expression turned a little graver as he watched from some distance away. The strength displayed by the martial animal was remarkable. But Baron is also very handy. As expected of an apex-level genius. A look of thought was revealed on Ezra's face. Baron's strength had the realm of the core formation stage. In addition, Ezra could tell that when Baron and Little Frost came into contact, the two seemed to fuse together. The ice bird's attacks began to display liveliness and fluidity, and had even started to give off the same strange boost. The shattered ice feathers. Ezra stared at the battlefield. The feathers that had been shattered by the tiger had turned into almost undetectable dust. The dust floated in the air and was unknowingly breathed in by the tiger, entering its body. What a formidable tactic. Can't believe that bird is able to take things to this level. Shock filled Ezra's heart. The previous ice feather bombardment had only been a ruse. The bird's true aim was to conceal the existence of the ice dust that contained extremely cold force. If Ezra Zephyr hadn't gone through the hellish training that gave him astonishingly sharp senses, he would have likely been unable to discover the dust that could not be seen with the naked eye. The tiger is going to lose, remarked Ezra Zephyr in his heart. Sure enough, things went just as Ezra had expected. Unbeknownst to the tiger, its speed began to drop as the battle went on, while a faint layer of frost began to appear on its fur. At a certain moment, Baron's eyes seemed to harden as his mouth opened, spitting out a ball of light. Inserting inside the body of the bird. The ice bird also opened its beak as cold force whizzed out, transforming into an icy gale that abruptly swept across the area. Icy winds howled past, instantly freezing the ground. Just as the tiger was about to circulate its force to block, its body suddenly turned rigid as the cold force inside abruptly exploded. In the short span of a few breaths, the giant multicolored tiger had transformed into a lifelike ice statue. I hate this, too tiring. Baron's shoulders slumped, his face a little sweaty. The earlier battle might have seemed easy, but at the end of the day, the tiger was still a Peel second-tier martial animal, with power that was comparable to the early of the Foundation establishment stage. "Did you buff that bird?" The prince gave Baron a curious look. This was the first time he had seen someone ordering a martial animal without establishing a contract, except himself. Baron grinned and said, "This is the innate talent of elves, just like beastmen's senses and dwarfs' craftsmanship. We elves, the offsprings of sacred tree, can communicate with nature, and my martial spirit has light attribute." Apart from that, the big guy was just a little too stupid, allowing the frost sparrow's ice dust to enter its body. He hopped off the sparrow's back, arriving in front of the frozen giant tiger as he reached out his spear. With a gentle knock, the ice sculpture shattered, leaving only scattered pieces of ice on the ground. White spiritual energy rose and converged in the air, forming a white spiritual bead. Baron's hand reached out, attempting to grab the bead. However, the instant he touched it, the prince's expression suddenly changed as he cried out, "Careful." The moment this word left his mouth, a flash of bluish mana suddenly shot out from the forest behind them, vicious and ruthless as it shot towards the fatal spot on Baron's back at an indescribable speed. A rip could be seen in the air in that split-second moment. Baron also sensed the sudden spiritual energy that was heading his way, causing his expression to involuntarily change. However, he had just relaxed his guard, and would not be in time to circulate his spiritual energy. The attacker had chosen the most perfect timing. SSCCCHHHUIAI. Blue thick light arrived like a flash of lightning. Just as it was about to hit Baron, however, Ezra's body swiftly dashed over, throwing himself forward like a pouncing wolf as he grabbed Baron and crashed into the ground. They tumbled several times before coming to a stop. Boom. The blue light landed on the now empty ground, causing a wave of thick spiritual energy to unfurl. The ground was torn open, the boiling water melting even rocks. The wave of liquid burned a good chunk of Baron's clothes, leaving a piercing pain on his skin. He frowned as he looked down at Ezra and asked, "Are you hurt?" Baron's eyes were wide with rage, his teeth tightly clenched together as he stared in the same direction where the Prince of Bloodfang Kingdom was looking. If he had not responded as quickly as he did earlier, the sneak attack would have likely succeeded. Baron angrily commanded the bird, "Go and capture him." Eee. The sparrow-looking bird released an angry cry, its wings suddenly flapping as a surge of freezing air swept forth. Any tree that came into contact with was instantly turned to ice. Haha, what a violent elf. When the freezing air swept past, bluish light exploded like boiling magma, completely blocking the attack. The bluish mana parted, allowing Ezra and Baron to see a pretty figure elegantly and slowly walking out from within. Only when she neared did they realize that it was an extremely pretty girl, her hair blue like the ocean. "Who are you?" Baron's brows furrowed. They did not know this blue-haired girl. Upon hearing Baron's question, the blue-haired girl smiled faintly, displaying a lovely smiling face. However, there was not much warmth in her smile, but instead a chilling risk. "Rima, Upper Realm, Las Filipinas." "Rima? Las Filipinas?" Ezra and Baron's expressions slightly changed at this moment. "Boy, now I understand. I know who they are." Fenrir spoke. "Tell me, Fenrir," asked the prince. "Las Filipinas is one of the superpowers which perished during the Celestial War. Now, just like me as a martial spirit, they have their own domain in the upper realm. The martial spirits of Las Filipinas are those terrifying mythic figures who wield amazing powers and past. Their domain's head has the martial spirit of a mythic god called Bathala, an entity who rivals Odin and Zeus." Ezra was astonished. He knew how powerful Zeus and Odin were. Fenrir told him about them. The prince stared at the blue-haired girl called Rima, frowning as he said, "Looks like your Las Filipinas has been eyeing our Naren continent for a long time." The other party's timing had been impeccable, secretly slipping into the spirity bailiwick through some unknown method the moment it opened. This clearly meant that they had been planning this operation for a long time. Upper Realm Witch, why did you attack me?" Baron's face was hostile as he stared at Rima. To leave my name on the spirity tablet, of course. Rima softly chuckled. Your Naren continent does not have many decent apex-level geniuses, leaving me no choice but to seek you out. Eee. The bird flapped its wings, immediately causing an icy force to gather towards it. It was a domineering and impressive sight, even the air began to freeze into countless ice crystals. Swwish. It transformed into a flash of cold light that shot towards Rima at an astonishing speed. The corners of Rima's soft lips curled slightly, the tip of her foot pushing off the ground as her body rose into the air. Meanwhile, bluish light shot out from her sleeve like a coiling acid whip. Zachsha. The blue light descended, wrapping around the bird. It turned out to be a long liquid whip that seemed to burn with acid as it firmly bounded the bird. Eee. No matter how hard it struggled, the bird was unable to break free and cried in pain. Hee, how do you like my whip? Rima chuckled. Baron was greatly alarmed, evidently never expecting that Rima would possess a means to restrain the second-tier martial animal. A single move was all it had taken to bind the unprepared bird. Acidic beast lock. Rima understood that she could not give any chances to a formidable foe. After trapping the bird, she appeared in front of Baron in a flash, forming a seal with her hand as she sent it towards the latter. Boom. Bluish liquid mana whizzed forth, seemingly transforming into an acidic fist. The splashes of acid echoed from it as it ferociously blasted towards Baron with violent, overwhelming might. The spearman gritted his teeth as he thrust his spear forward, light mana surging with a piercing hiss. Bong. The two clashed directly. Rima ended up nimbly drifting backwards, but Baron was violently shaken, staggering back several steps before steadying himself. His bright and clean face was flushed red, the mana and blood in his body clearly churning uncontrollably. TCH. You seem to be only SOSO without that martial animal. Rima let out a pleasant-sounding laugh. Baron's face turned dark with fury. He had many spells in his arsenal, but all of them needed high consumption of mana. He spent a lot of his spiritual energy to defeat the peak second-tier martial animal earlier, something that exhausted the whole squad of Ixtal Malark. Due to Baron inattention, the bird also had been trapped at the beginning of the battle. If that is all you have, there will be one less apex-level genius in your Naren continent today. Rima seemed to sigh regretfully, but the smile on her lips was exceptionally cold. Swwish. Her body shot forward once again, bluish liquid mana erupting from her body, the rippling wave of boiling liquid that ensued causing tree after tree to burst into flames. She was like an avatar of acid as she charged towards Baron, fingertips flickering with a cold inhumane light yet incomparably hot at the same time. You think I'm scared of you? Rima's overbearingness caused Baron's temper to flare. He clenched his spear as his mana began to stir, intending to accompany this woman all the way. Just as he was about to move, a figure blocked him from the front. He looked over, only to be stunned. Ezra. He hastily said, leave quickly, that crazy woman is very difficult to deal with. Although he knew that Ezra Zephyr had very mysterious unknown powers and was the first to make his name on the tablet, he still believed that the prince managed to defeat Ixtal using some underhanded methods. Otherwise, it would be impossible for a chi brightening stage expert to defeat the core formation expert. In his view, it was obviously impossible for Ezra Zephyr to be her match. The prince waved his hand. Shut your mouth and hide somewhere, I will deal with this woman. What? Baron was somewhat astonished. Are all you lower realm people so arrogant? To think that a mere chi brightening stage expert dares to obstruct me. Rima was pretty amused by this scene, but the light flickering within her eyes was full of ridicule. Since you want to play the hero, I shall grant your wish. Rima laughed in a mocking manner. Water-like mana swirled around her body as her blue hair danced, making her look like a water witch. Her hands clenched tightly before she sent out a punch. Patang. The air exploded, while the fist winds cut deep scars in the ground below her feet. This punch could easily create a hole in a core formation stage cultivator. There was no fear in Ezra's scarlet eyes as he watched the ferocious attack rapidly approach, but instead a surge of burning excitement. Upper Realm Martial Masters. I do want to see just how strong they are. Ezra's 5 fingers also clenched into a fist. Black bolts of chaos force thundered out of the body, covering his body as a few bolts twerked around his fist's knuckles. The prince smiled and dashed forward. He wanted to test the power of the upper realm. Ezra's figure was akin to an arrow that had been released, rocketing forward as he tore through the air. A punch was sent out without the slightest shred of hesitation, smashing straight towards Rima's own. Reckless fool. The blue-haired girl mocked. This was the first time she had seen a chi-brightening cultivator dare to clash directly against a third-circle sorcerer like her. You stupid werewolf. Baron could not help but close his eyes. Chaos force, break the sky. At the instant of impact, Ezra's fist seemed to become slow and heavy as dark lightning rippled outwards, shaking the air and fissuring the ground. The power of this punch was not only enhanced by spiritual energy, but also every bit of his muscle strength. Its might was ferocious to the extreme. Boom. 2 fists containing dreadfully terrifying power slammed into each other. A muffled boom filled the surroundings. The world seemed to fall silent for an instant before a shockwave of devastation unfurled. The surrounding ground began to crumble inch by inch. Rocks were torn to pieces, while tree after tree disintegrated into splinters that filled the sky. The entire place was now in a complete mess. Baron looked towards the site of the clash, only to see Ezra and Rima's figures taking a dozen steps backwards. Rima's face had become extremely ugly. Baron's gaze swept over the former, discovering a huge bruise on her hand, while fresh blood dripped from her fingertips. In comparison, Ezra Zephyr's hand was full of blood and burns. His hand looked ugly at this point, but his facial expression showed that he was not hurt at all. It was obvious that Rima had taken the upper hand in the earlier exchange. Baron was so confused at the recklessness of Bloodfang's kingdom. Ezra's fingers slowly relaxed as the golden scales receded. He lifted his gaze and looked towards the grim-faced Rima as he softly chuckled and said, "Although you are from the upper realm. If we talk about hardness, you're not as hard as me." Rima's eyes widened. She was sure that the attack was enough to kill that chi-brightening brat, but the events changed. In that devastated forest, Ezra slowly relaxed his fist. His opponent had not managed to gain even the slightest advantage in their previous clash. With the power of unstoppable chaos force and a well-trained body, Ezra was above the rest of the apex geniuses. But the reason he was able to survive those monstrous attacks was his attire. The bracers, plates, even the black long coat and wolf shoulder plates. Every one of them was a legendary item prepared for him by Fenrir. Otherwise, the outcome of Ixtal Malark and this clash would have been different. Hey, fight properly, stop being a vulgar hoodlum. While Ezra was secretly pleased with himself, Baron's voice was suddenly heard from behind. Ezra was stunned, confusion on his face as he looked towards the Baron, who was currently glaring at him. What was that? The exhausted Baron seriously said, "The other party is a girl, how can she compare hardness with you?" He was clearly talking about the hardness of their fists. How had Baron twisted things so far? Baron burst into laughter as he looked at Ezra with squinted eyes. He was the one being vulgar, why need to be so fierce? Did he get a concussion? Pondered the prince. Nearby, Rima had also heard Baron's words, immediately causing her already ugly face to twist even more, while her ripe chest heaved in anger as if it was about to explode. "Bastard, I'm definitely killing you today." Rima's shout was trembling with white-hot rage. Boom. Ocean-like blue mana burst out from her body like boiling water. The ground below began to melt, emitting an extremely terrifying heat. Acid ocean fish. With a thought from Reem, the bluish acid-like spiritual energy turned into a giant boiling fish that viciously swatted down onto Ezra Zephyr. The prince did not dare to delay, black lightning dashing out from his body to form a dome. Crackle, crackle. The boiling fish continued its ferocious swatting, causing the Chaos Force dome to tremble without end. However, although the latter kept rippling, it was ultimately able to endure and was not broken by the boiling fish. After about a dozen swats, Rima gradually regained her cool, a sliver of graveness entering her eyes. The previous exchange had already told her that this seemingly chi-brightening youth was not simple at all. The latter's spiritual power was plentiful and concentrated, far surpassing that of the others. In fact, it was comparable to the 7th grade martial spirits. Moreover, the black lightning was definitely extremely dangerous, hence it did not seem to falter even in a direct clash with her acidic mana like this. I don't believe that I, Rima, can't even handle a chi brightening like you. Rima's anger had been roused again. With a grasp of her hand, an azure fan appeared within it. The surface of the fan was filled with liquid-like patterns, and every feather was wet. The droplets from it burnt the ground, evidently retrieved from a martial animal, a top-level special-grade item. Try my 5 birds boiling fan. Rima's hand jerked as the feather fan fanned, releasing a giant wave of blue mana. The mana transformed into magnificent waves that began to cover the sky, like a tsunami, as it surged towards Ezra. Every drop of acid concealed volatile undulations that would explode and release an enormously destructive force upon contact. The tsunami of acid seemed to engulf Ezra Zephyr as the short sword Efsa in his hand began to glow. With a jolt of his arm, the short sword extended outwards and slashed. BANNNGG. The tsunami of acid clashed with the bombardment of sword slashes, resulting in a violent explosion that seemed to incinerate even the surrounding air. The explosion lasted for a brief moment, turning the tsunami to scatter everywhere. However, the drops of acid destroyed everywhere they landed, and the surrounding trees and grounds were damaged and burnt by them. The short sword of Ezra, Efsa, and the unbreakable chain Gleipnir were of the highest possible quality, hence, it was impossible to burn them. After blocking the acid tsunami, Ezra did not politely wait for his opponent's next move. His body swiftly shot forth, the sword went like an unstoppable arrow, swift as lightning as it thrust towards Rima. A tall figure limped, the wound on his shoulder was so deep that his arm went numb. He wore silver gauntlets, his other arm held a compass, and he gazed at it as he murmured. I must reach towards His Majesty, the enemies are dangerous. That Victor, bastard. His eyes focused on the red dot on the compass, ignoring the rest. At that point, he sensed some figures nearby. Who are you? Show yourself? Said Argus Waska. Hee, an injured wolf. What a jackpot. Uttered the man who led the group. He smiled at the end, exhibiting his yellow, unwashed teeth. CLLAANNG. Rima's fan blocked horizontally with its surface as her lips parted, spitting out acidic spittle at Ezra Zephyr's face. The black bolts rushed out of Ezra Zephyr's eyes, blocking the acidic spittle. Such a disrespectful move raised the anger within Ezra. Clang, clang, clang. The exchange between the two was lightning quick, short sword and side of the fan meeting time and time again with metallic clangs as sparks spluttered. Every attack of both individuals was ruthless, but everyone was blocked by the other party. While the two were locked in battle, Baron arrived at the trapped frost sparrow's side, his hand reaching out pouring warm light into the bird as astonishing cold force began flowing out from the bird's body, attacking the whip. Baron said through gritted teeth, Crazy woman, I'll show you my spells after I free this martial animal. Rima sensed Baron's actions, causing the former's eyebrows to furrow as a surge of annoyance rose within her. She had originally thought that she would be able to easily deal with the Prince of Bloodfang Kingdom. Who could have imagined that he would turn out to be so powerful, making it such that she was unable to extract herself instead? If Baron managed to free the ice bird, the addition of their combined might would make Rima's side fall into a perilous situation. I need to finish off this guy. A determined and ruthless look flitted across her eyes. Soon after, her figure suddenly backed away, tightly gripping the boiling acidic fan as she sucked in a deep breath, blue light flashing in her eyes. 6th circle spell, Salivation of Phoenix. She bit the tip of her tongue and spat out blood that landed on the fan before sending out a powerful swing. SWOOSSH. A formation was formed and reddish water came out, transforming into a bucket of lava. Above the lava bucket, one could faintly see a bird made of fire, dancing in the air. Imprints of light also drifted around it as an astonishing heat wave rippled. The appearance of the lava bucket bathed the entire forest in an aura of scorching heat, making it feel as if it would burst into flames at any moment. Ezra's expression turned grave. The bucket of lava was akin to a volatile compressed mass of overwhelming destructive power. Let's not mention the sixth circled spell that can even burn a core formation expert instantly burned to ashes if hit by it. Rima was indeed someone with ability. Baron also sensed the disturbance and hastily shouted, "Ezra, quickly retreat. That's a sixth circle spell infused with that witch's blood, its power is insane." However, the prince did not budge. The chaos force under his feet rose him into the air as his expression turned serious. 5 fingers stretched outwards as black lightning suddenly leaped from his palm. "You should also have a taste of my Gamma Layer skill as well." Battle lust surged in Ezra's eyes. This was the first time he was going to use the skill after learning it, which made him very interested in just how powerful it was going to be. PPIACCHA. Wind and light gathered on Ezra's palm. His spiritual energy pulsed a dozen breaths later as a several-inch wide twinkling ball appeared in his hand. Glittering wind and light. Bizzizz. The prince's arm was flung and the colorful shining wind ball rocketed forth with a rumble. In the next instant, the lava bucket and colorful ball clashed. Boom. An indescribable storm of spiritual energy unfurled, the air cackling with both fire and wind. The forest in 100 feet radius was turned into the barren land, while the ground was scorched black. Rima's figure appeared. Her current appearance was rather miserable. She had been caught up in the aftermath of the attack earlier, the berserk shockwaves shaking the mana and blood in her body, causing a trace of blood to appear at the corner of her mouth. He should be dead with this, right? Rima gritted her teeth as she looked to her front. The dust gradually settled. However, Rima's face turned ugly once again. Ezra's figure remained unmoved from the spot, though a lightning shell-like shield had appeared in front of him. It was this Chaos Force shield that had defended Ezra against the shockwaves. Who in the world is that man? Baron was shocked, his eyes filled with astonishment. He never expected that the prince's strength would rise to this level, contrary to all the rumors about him. Rima's strength was surely much higher than his own. Even so, the former was unable to take any advantage in the fight. It was obvious that Ezra had grown very rapidly ever since entering the spirity bailiwick. The defeat of Ixtal was not coincident, murmured Baron before shouting, "Good going, Ezra." Rima bit her lip in anger, nearly tearing them in the process. She stared at Ezra Zephyr as she raised an eyebrow and muttered, "Ezra. Ezra Zephyr? Now that I think about it, this name is rather familiar." After some thought, she finally remembered as he jerked her head to look at the tablet. "So you are the werewolf Prince Ezra Zephyr?" Rima let out an icy chuckle. "So this is where you were. Good, your enemy is also here. I will call him over to play with you." The moment the final word left her mouth, she waved her hand as a ball of mana flew into the sky. The ball exploded, sending out peculiar waves as the signal. Ezra's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw this. Victor Brownmane was also here? No, she is probably talking about Salom, pondered the prince. Not long after Rima sent out her signal, Ezra heard the sound of rushing wind swiftly speeding towards them. In the end, he saw the fog far away ripple as 3 figures slowly walked out. One of them was someone he knew. It was Salom Uqually. The other was dressed in a loincloth and another man of well-built, and the eyes of one in loincloth were grey vortexes that gave one an indescribable strange feeling. Salom Uqually walked forward with his hands behind his back, playing with balls. The first thing he saw was Ezra Zephyr, causing him to be taken aback for a moment before a playful look emerged from the corners of his mouth. "Ezra Zephyr, I did expect to meet you again." The prince voluntarily smirked at the sight of 3 individuals who had walked out from the fog, Salom equally, and the youth in loincloth. You've teamed up with the upper realm to save your weak ass? Salom indifferently replied, short-sighted. The future me will not be limited to a mere lower realm or Naren continent. Why should my lower realm identity restrict me? How shameless. Baron condemned. You colluded with these upper realm people to gang up on fair sort of humanity. You truly are the worst. Salom shook his head, his voice unchanged as he said, the only truth is that the victor is right, and the process is of little importance. Since there was a stumbling block in my way, I will naturally have to remove it. Are you not afraid of the war that your actions will ignite between your Ukuli clan and the Jolton Empire of humans? Salom laughed, anything that happens here will stay here, that's the rule of Spirity Bailiwick. Ezra swept a gaze towards him. It's a pity that you even threw away your pride, but it's actually a nice move. Accomplishing something great alone is beyond the limit of your existence. Becoming the errand boy of these guys was the only available option. You are smarter than you look. The prince mocked with a wicked grin. Salom's expression finally turned rigid, his gaze somewhat frosty as he stared at Ezra and said, finding you here is an unexpected but pleasant surprise. I heard that you are on pretty good terms with Fairsword, am I right? If you are caught and used as bait, do you think that he will still choose to come even though it's clearly a trap? Boom. Salom was swift and decisive, powerful chi exploding from his body like a storm at his final word. His spiritual energy was akin to a pressuring mountain, shining brilliantly with awe-inspiring power. SWWIISSH. He was extremely quick, appearing in front of Ezra Zephid in a single step. The tip of Ezra's foot was also pushed off the ground as his figure rapidly retreated. However, Salom was like a shadow, sticking close to Ezra no matter how hard the latter tried to escape. Indifference was the only thing on the latter's face as a punch was sent flying. Brownish chi blossomed, appearing below the fist like a muddy mountain. The punch caused the surrounding space to ripple slightly, while the air around shook. Salom displayed extreme power, a power that was slightly less domineering than Rima's. Ezra Zephyr's scarlet pupils tightened slightly as the punch whizzed towards him. There was no hesitation whatsoever as chaos energy surged within his body, causing two portals to be formed in midair. Second circle spell, Chains of Chaos. Ezra also sent out a punch after uttering the words. Two black chains fused with bolts came from the portals, as the punch was sent to stop Salom's attack, giving it a blackish lightning luster that seemed impenetrable. Boom. The two fists slammed into each other, cold cruelness flitting across Salom's eyes as he said in a chilling voice, do you believe that you will possess the qualifications to face me head-on because you defeated Ixtal? Naive. What? The chains. Dong. Ezra's body jerked backwards, his feet smearing long lines on the ground as he was pushed back. Ezra was blown away by the attack. However, the moment he was blown backwards, the prince's sleeve shook as a flash of a myriad of colors shot out. Its speed was akin to lightning, swiftly appearing in front of Salom equally. It was a shining wind ball that was several feet wide. Light and wind rapidly swirled within it, while the faint sounds of sparkling light and howling wind could be heard with a slight touch of rumbling thunder. Berserk energy spread from the ball. Salom's pupils shrank slightly. Glittering wind and light. An almost inaudible voice was gently spat out from Ezra Zephyr's mouth. Boom. Wind and light exploded. Even though Salom immediately used his spiritual energy to shield himself, he was still blasted till his shield shook violently as he staggered a dozen steps back. His sleeve had been burnt and shredded, his blood churning slightly. Showing that he was injured, his expression had become exceptionally stormy. Because this was the first time he had been beaten back by Ezra Zephyr. This was simply unacceptable to him. The one who was once an ant in his eyes had unknowingly gained the power to shake him. Intense killing intent flashed in Salom Uquali's eyes. He could feel that Ezra Zephyr is growing far too fast. Before we had entered the Spirity Bailiwick, a single punch from me could heavily injure and even kill him. And yet, I had sent out the same punch just moments earlier, but the only thing it had achieved was forcing this bastard back a little. He must have found something extraordinary in Spirity Bailiwick, Salom said to himself. In fact, the latter had even found an interval to counterattack, catching him unprepared and injuring him as result. If this continued, it would not be long before the once ant-like existence grew strong enough to face him directly. The thought of such a scene made killing intent practically spew from Salom's eyes. He could not imagine it, because it would finally touch the forbidden fear in the deepest recesses of his heart. Almost material killing intent surged around Salom's body, sweeping up the surrounding lives. It was as if the temperature had suddenly dropped. However, Ezra paid no heed to Salom's killing intent. His rapidly retreating figure did not stop even for a second, while he made a sign to Baron with the hand behind his back. The current situation was too unfavorable to them. Ezra was not afraid of Salom, he had the power to beat him. What Fenrir warned him about was the invaders of the upper realm. They were acting as Salom's partners while their power far surpassed the likes of Salom equally. Each one had the power to fight apex genius alone. The earlier clash with Rima was the proof. Rima was still watching from the side, and there was an even more dangerous youth in loincloth. The power he felt from the latter was even higher than what he felt from fair sort of humanity, Jon Stark. In addition, his sharp senses had already detected that the mana was faintly beginning to gather around the youth in loincloth. The icy sparrow was finally freed by Baron. It immediately shook its wings, transforming into a flash of icy light that swept up both Ezra, Zephyr and Baron, before shooting into the fog without any hesitation. Meanwhile, the youth in loincloth, called Rolo had just stealthily lifted his hand only to be stunned. He could only watch as the two humans and the beast was cast into the fog, disappearing from sight. Rolo said in amazement, "What a sharp guy." Ezra had realized the moment Rolo showed signs of secretly preparing to make his move. Thus, the former decisively chose to withdraw, and even into the fog. As such, they would also have to enter the fog if they chose to chase. Salom's expression was ominously dark. It felt as if he had been played. Rolo remarked, "This foe of yours is no simple individual. He is clearly only at the chi brightening stage, but even Rima was forced to admit defeat." Salom equally was expressionless as he looked towards Rolo. "Are we chasing? Jon Stark and all of the Bloodfang Kingdom will surely voluntarily seek us out if he is captured. Not to mention that spearman, he is the aide of Elf Princess Fairy Hololeth, the apex genius who saved Jon Stark." Rolo chuckled. "If they truly are so magnetic, it will save us some effort. We'll chase then. Although that werewolf guy is quick-witted and chose to hide in the fog. He does not know that the fog is not a hindrance in my eyes." Rolo grinned a little. At that time a voice rang in his head, a thick voice filled with dignity. "Rolo, that man is very dangerous. He gave me strange familiar feelings, either kill him quickly or do not engage with him at all." The eyes of Rolo were squinted in ponder. "I will keep that in mind," said Rolo to his martial spirit. A strange light surfaced in his grey pupils as a tear of blood dripped from the corner of his eyes. The world before him began to change, the layers of mist receding as the figures of two humans and a beast brightened in his sights. "That way. Let's go." Rolo's finger stretched out and pointed in a certain direction. Salom was the first to rocket forward, his figure quick as lightning as he gave chase, while icy murder surged in his eyes. "Ezra, you will not escape this time. I will no longer give you any opportunity to grow. That's why this place will be your grave." SWWIASSSH. The sound of rapidly traveling wind suddenly sounded within the thick fog as a blue figure swept past. Icy winds blew, freezing the leaves on the nearby trees. Within the blue light was an enormous icebird, while werewolf prince and elf spearman were seated on its back. Ezra's brows were slightly furrowed as he looked behind and mumbled to himself, "The youth in loincloth should be the one who joined hands with Salom equally to injure Jon Stark, Rolo He is indeed no ordinary person." Although Rolo had yet to do anything earlier, Ezra's bestial senses could feel that the level of threat he posed was way higher than that of Salom's. Salom, Rolo plus Rima. The lineup on the other side was clearly much stronger than Baron and him. That's why Ezra did not entertain any thoughts of taking them on, but instead planned the use of the clash with Salom to decisively escape. Ezra, we've entered the fog. It will disrupt our senses, making it very troublesome. Baron was rather worried. The prince shook his head. We had no choice. A single second later and they would have unleashed their full power to stop us. If we were trapped, it will be extremely unfavorable. Only by entering the fog can we try to shake them off. Baron angrily gnashed his teeth. Those bastards, taking advantage of their numbers. When we join up with Her Majesty and the rest, just see how ruthlessly I'll kill them. He was the genius of Elfpatria, an empire of elves. How could he suffer the indignity of being forced to flee? Ezra smirked. His gang was more terrifying than any current force in Spirity Bailiwick. Ezra ordered everyone to find Argus Waska. That's why he was alone fighting without any of aid. He was assured that not even upper realm invaders can kill him if act with his brain. His eyes narrowed slightly as he recalled his earlier clash with Salom Yukwali, remembering how boldly he said to give back the territory of Tribban Kingdom to Emily Jomez. Haha, I wonder how he is feeling now. The corners of Ezra's mouth curled. SWWWIISSHH. Ezra's expression suddenly changed as he looked towards the dense fog behind them where faint ripples could be seen. Baron, increase the bird's speed. They've come chasing. Baron was startled. Even after we entered the fog? Are they not afraid of losing their bearings? The prince calmly replied, it seems that I've scared them too much, and they are now very determined to get rid of me. Baron lightly patted the ice bird. Each pat poured a certain amount of light mana, immediately causing it to release a clear cry. Its wings flapped, cold force exploding behind it as its speed rapidly soared, transforming into a blur that swiftly shot forward. Not long after the ice bird transformed into a blur and disappeared into the distance, the mist began to ripple as three figures emerged. How fast? Salom Yukwali was expressionless. The vortexes in Rolo's eyes swirled as he indifferently said that Werewolf has very sharp senses. His bloodline and martial spirit should be pretty strong, allowing him to sense our approach. But don't worry, he can't escape. His gaze suddenly turned to another direction and flicked his finger. A ball of mana exploded, transmitting peculiar waves. Soon after, the mist in that direction was torn open as a figure emerged. It was another apex-level genius of the upper realm who came with Salom and Rolo and went somewhere in mid-battle. Carl, how did it go? Rolo looked towards the youth. The baby-faced Carl grinned as he nodded. He was pretty good and had a very tough body. However, he is killed. The other one went inside the fog. Rolo's gray eyes scanned the area as he indifferently said, no rush, none of them can escape. Go. With a wave of his hand, he and Salom Yukwali flew forward. Their numbers have increased? Ezra spread out his spiritual senses in the fog, pouring all his energy into scouting. Soon after, his expression changed slightly. He could faintly feel that the spiritual energy undulations to their rear had increased. Moreover, the new one was extremely strong, indicating that it did not belong to a weakling. Baron's face also changed slightly, clenching his jaw as he said, looks like they plan to surround us. Ezra nodded slightly. A brief moment later, the expression in his eyes suddenly turned solemn as he thrust the short sword Efsa in his hand. The sword transformed into a bluish smoke as it shot towards a certain spot in the fog. SWWOSH. A tree burst apart, revealing the figure behind it. Ezra and Baron's gazes shot over, only to be stunned. The figure's clothes were in tatters, only his armor pieces and gauntlets left intact, making him look rather miserable. But Ezra knew who he was. Argus? Ezra was surprised. You were hiding here? When the former saw the latter, he quickly bent his knee, his body was aching but he knelt and greeted. Your Majesty, I followed the compass. I am so happy that you are well. I apologize to show this miserable sight of mine. A thought suddenly struck Baron as he gazed upon Argus's injured face. You were attacked by Victor Brownmane? Baron remembered the name Argus, it was shown on the tablet. Argus Waska was silent for a moment before he shook his head. No, I attacked him first. You couldn't beat your opponent? Ezra asked without any expression. Argus lowered his head as he said, Your Majesty, I do not fear the one called Victor, but there were many other individuals hidden nearby who had locked onto me, causing me to split my attention while not daring to use my full power. Hence how he found an opening. Baron was stunned. So despicable. He hatefully said, Why are these people fighting without any dignity? Ezra Zephyr calmly answered, Because only those on our level can pose a threat to them. They are unified, while you guys are scattered. Breaking all of you one by one will naturally lower the morale of all the other geniuses. Taking away their courage such that they will no longer be able to vie for the gifts and blessings of the spirity Bailiwick. Be it the Upper Realm or Brownmane Empire, they attack in groups when they encounter a strong opponent, not because they are afraid of one-on-one fight but because this method is more efficient. The law of jungle is applied here. Argus coughed weakly twice, before asking, Your Majesty, what should we do now? We will make them remember that in a jungle, the most dangerous pack hunters are hungry wolves, Ezra said. There was no smile on his face, just sheer anger. Come here, even though I am not as good in healing as Her Highness, but I am still an elf, said Baron as he began to heal Argus with light magic. Thank you. I will remember this debt, said Argus with some difficulty. He was clearly somewhat conflicted and embarrassed. After all, he had attacked Victor Brownmane to avenge, but now ended up in such a pathetic state. Ezra nonchalantly waved his hand as he pondered. Victor and Salom have the same nature, if they meet it is more likely that they'll join hands. I need to make a platform for the biggest event of Spirity Bailiwick. Bloodfawn Kingdom martial masters were his own force, and those who have been targeted by the Upper Realm people and other oppressors will naturally stand against them. It would have been nice if things were simple. Ezra could have just killed every trouble, but there were many eyes and unknown powers. If anyone recognizes the obscure power of the prince, he'll have to face a lot of trouble or even worse, a quick death. What do we do now? Where do we go? They have the number superiority. Apart from Salom and the Upper Realm, you have also made Brownmane and Striped Beast, two big empires, your enemies. We will surely be wiped out if we faced them. There was a bitter look on Baron's face. Ezra pondered in silence for a few moments, his eyes flickering in thought. A short while later, he pointed towards the deepest depths of the fog. You said before that there are quite a number of second-tier martial animals, and even a mysterious martial animal leader at the deepest part of the mountain range where the scaled pool is? Yes. Then that's where we'll be heading. Only by stirring up some chaos will we be able to lose them. Fog pervaded the mountains as an icy shadow swept past. Ezra was seated on Ice Sparrow's back, his spirit senses spreading outwards. Although the fog could distort one's sense of direction, Ezra was just barely able to guide them through his powerful senses. To the left, uttered the prince. The bird immediately shook its wings, turning directions. We've already reached the depths of the mountain range. Ezra glanced to his rear, his gaze frosty as he continued, They're still closely following us. How patient. He could detect 4 presences some distance behind, tailing them like shadows. It was clear that Salom and Rolo's gang did not intend to give up so easily. Baron said in a low voice, What do we do now? Any deeper and we will begin to encounter second-tier martial animals. Ezra's eyes narrowed slightly as he stared into the depths of the fog, faintly seeing a shimmer of gold, while he also began to sense several powerful spiritual energy ripples. They clearly nearing the scaled pool. The spiritual energy ripples he had sensed likely belonged to the martial animals protecting the pool. Ezra decisively declared, Go in. Baron gritted his teeth and patted the bird. With a loud cry, its speed rose sharply. A short few minutes later, Ezra and the group discovered that they had exited the fog. Behind the fog lay an ancient mountain forest where numerous towering trees proudly stood. Awuwu. Brief moments after Ezra and gang charged out from the fog, a loud howl was suddenly heard. "Keep going," cried the prince. Two groups, one fleeing, and one chasing, giving rise to a huge disturbance in the depths of the mountain range. They crossed numerous mountains in a short few minutes. Golden light soon blossomed before their eyes, only for them to see a giant mountain standing some distance to their front. The top of the mountain was akin to a scaled turtle shell, with only endless gold light spread from its energy scales, dazzling like a pool of gold. The scaled pool. Argus's eyes glowed as he stared at the mountaintop. Behind them, Rolo Salom equally, and the rest closely followed, desire surfacing in their eyes as their gazes fell upon the resplendent scaled pool. "It seems that the scaled pool blessings are fated to be ours." Salom laughed as he rubbed his hands together. "I have to thank you for leading the way." Ruhar. However, a myriad of roars suddenly rang out across the area the moment Salom's laughter faded. Next, the pupils of everyone on both sides shrank when they saw enormous martial animal after martial animal appeared on the mountain top, their eyes rapidly locking onto the humans. Over a dozen second-tier martial animals. This lineup made the expressions of both parties change. However, it was still not over. The titanic beasts prostrated themselves, their heads lowered as if they were bowing. Baron's expression did not look too good either as he said, "Rumor speaks of a mysterious martial animal leader at the scaled pool to whom numerous second-tier martial animals have yielded." Ezra's brows tightly knitted together. It seems that the rumors were true. This was really unlucky for them. "If things become worse, we'll quickly escape amidst the chaos," said Ezra Zephyr in a soft voice. Baron and Argus nodded. Even Baron was no longer thinking about the scaled pool now. Some distance behind them, Rolo and Salom Equally's expressions turned grave. They could faintly feel alarmingly powerful undulations in the depths of the golden light. Under their guarded gazes, a low howl filled with dignity rang out from the top of the giant mountain, causing every martial animal on the mountain to tremble. A figure slowly emerged from within the golden light. In the end, the figure stepped out, appearing in everyone's sight. Huh? Everyone was stunned the moment the figure revealed itself, because the thing that had appeared was no behemoth, but a crimson-colored little cub-like creature. The little martial animal yawned, its beady eyes disdainfully looking towards the gathered crowd. Everyone blankly watched the scene. Moments later, they were unable to stop themselves from vigorously rubbing their eyes before very carefully looking again as their expressions turned extremely spectacular. Argus asked in a hesitant voice, "Your Majesty, are my eyes deceiving me? Why does that little creature look almost exactly like Skull?" Ezra was silent. In the end, he lightly nodded his head. "Your eyes aren't wrong. This little bastard has been enjoying his time as a king here while we were outside desperately fighting for our lives." Numerous beasts had prostrated themselves at the top of the mountain. The target of their respect was unexpectedly not a mighty giant beast, but a mysterious little crimson wolf. Ezra Zephyr and Argus Waska had naturally recognized it immediately. This little wolf was amongst the two partners of Ezra that had yet to be found ever since entering the spirity bailiwick, Skull. Even Ezra could not help but be somewhat surprised, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Who could have expected that Skull would be hiding here as the king of the mountain, enjoying a free and easy life? "You know this little creature?" In contrast to Ezra and Argus's shock, Baron's face was filled with graveness. He was no ordinary individual and naturally did not believe that the little creature was as simple as it seemed. Did no one see how respectful the other second-tier martial animals were being to it? The little wolf was obviously the most terrifying martial animal here. "Don't worry, everything should be fine now," Ezra consoled. He then lifted his hand and waved at Skull. As Skull saw his wave, its eyes still filled with the same excitement. Baron shot a bewildered look at Ezra. The corners of Ezra Zephyr's mouth stretched into a smile. Subsequently, the moment Ezra appeared, the surprise in the little wolf's eyes instantly changed, transforming into a shadow as it shot forward with a swish. Skull appeared in front of him, circling him twice as it held impatiently. Are you going to continue pretending? Ezra sneered. Skull jumped into Ezra's arms, sticking out its tongue to lick the latter's face, a fawning look in its beady eyes. He turned around with an unfriendly look in his eyes. His seemingly smiling gaze was cast at Rolo or Salom equally and the rest, whose expressions had begun to change. Salom's expression sunk slightly as he muttered, "How did this happen? Why does that mysterious little creature know him?" The scene before their eyes had already surpassed everyone's expectations. Rolo's complexion was a little ashen. There was indeed a creature at Ezra's side, it was not one, but two. They showed themselves when Victor attacked Ezra at the opening of Spirity Bailiwick, but I never imagined that it would be so capable that even these second-tier martial anims have submitted to it. Rima and Carl moved closer together, their expressions vigilant. If the little creature commanded these second-tier martial animals to attack them, they would have no choice but to flee. While the expression on the other side was looking pretty ugly, Ezra evilly looked towards them and coldly chuckled. "Didn't it feel really good when you guys were chasing us earlier?" Ezra gently patted Skill's head, while his other hand pointed towards Salom equally and Rolo or. "You selfish son of Fenrir, to think that you were enjoying your life here instead of protecting me. Do you know that these two bastards ganged up on me, resulting in Argus being injured, and they even dared to kill me?" Skull, who was originally still wiggling his tail, suddenly stiffened. Its attention immediately left Ezra as a somewhat terrifying howl was released from its throat. Skull's intelligence was extremely high and knew that his duty was to protect Ezra as his elder sibling. Thus, there was no way it would allow Ezra to sustain even the smallest injury. It lifted its head, its beady eyes staring straight into Ezra's own as if confirming what he had said earlier. Ezra looked into its eyes and slowly nodded. Skull silently raised his head, before jumping out of Ezra's arms as its beady eyes were cast towards Rolo or and Salom equally. Everyone could feel the astonishing ferocity that exploded from Skull's tiny body at this moment. Grr. Blazing fire unfurled as Skull's body abruptly grew. In a few breaths, a mysterious and dignified giant crimson wolf appeared in front of Ezra Zephyr's group. The crimson fur on its body was akin to flowing magma, while the bright orange fangs in its giant mouth seemed like hot metal. A storm of fire force violently swept out from its body, burning up the surrounding space. Awoo. Upon sensing Skull's rage, the dozen second-tier martial animals let loose deafening roars, making the entire mountain range shiver. The expressions of Rolo, Salom and the rest involuntarily changed, clearly feeling the almost crazed killing intent in Skull Howl. The sun on its head shone in yellow-gold light. Boom. With a bang, another giant wolf emerged from the mountain, a giant blue wolf, its cerulean body and frozen fangs like sharp peaks of glaciers growled at the latter. The ferocity of the cerulean wolf surpassed that of the crimson one, as if it was a mad wolf, it was Hattie. The moon on his forehead gleamed in white, and he received the signal of its brother Skull. Bannngg. A dozen second-tier martial animals suddenly shot forward, pouncing towards Rolo or's group. Rolo decisively shouted, "Retreat!" Their figures rapidly withdrew. Trying to escape? However, the moment they began to move, Baron had already appeared some distance behind them riding Icy Sparrow. Its wings flapped, shooting out a torrent of ice spikes. His attack was instantly torn apart by Rolo or and the rest, but the ice dust had already begun to drift across the area, seemingly freezing the space around them and slowing their speed. It was at this moment that the dozen second-tier martial animals arrived amidst thunderous roars, their merciless attacks seemingly covering the sky as they swept towards Rolo's group. Bong bong. The land seemed to crumble. Rolo, Salom and the rest did not dare to face the bombardment, their figures rapidly retreating. Skull's flame-like scarlet eyes locked onto them. All of a sudden, its body transformed into a flash of crimson light as it shot forward. Salom's pupils abruptly shrank. He had seen a crimson figure appear behind him from the corner of his eye.